At the company founding party, my daughter-in-law said, "Charity cases eat last." Just as I was reaching for a piece of food, the room filled with giggles. My son turned his back on me to sip his wine. I left without a word. The next morning, he texted me saying, "The business needs your investment." I replied with 2 words and sent 1 notice. By noon, they had lost everything. My name is Virgil Hightower, and I am 68 years old. I have grease under my fingernails that no amount of expensive soap can scrub away, and I wear it like a badge of honor. I spent 40 years building a logistics empire from a single rusted truck and a prayer. But to my family, I am just an embarrassment that needs to be hidden away. I built the floor they stand on, but they treat me like the dirt beneath it. Before I tell you how I brought my own empire crashing down on their heads, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been disrespected by the very people you sacrificed your life to raise. The crystal chandeliers of the Ritz-Carlton Ballroom in Atlanta glittered like frozen tears hanging from the ceiling. It was the 40th anniversary gala of Hightower Logistics, my company, or at least it used to be before I handed the keys to the kingdom over to my son Terrence. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ambition. I stood near a marble pillar, clutching a glass of sparkling water that cost more than my first hourly wage. I felt like a stranger in my own life. I looked down at my suit. It was a charcoal gray wool suit, double-breasted, and slightly loose around the shoulders, now that age had taken some of my bulk. It was the same suit I wore 30 years ago when I signed my first major contract with the city. I could still smell a faint trace of lavender on the lapel. It was the scent of my late wife, Etta. She used to brush this suit for me and tell me I looked like a king. Tonight, I did not feel like a king. I felt like a ghost. I watched the crowd of 300 people swirling around the room. Men in slim Italian tuxedos and women in silk gowns that shimmered under the lights. They were drinking champagne that I paid for. They were laughing at jokes I did not understand. And in the center of it all was Terrence, my boy. He looked handsome in his fitted navy tuxedo, holding court with a group of investors from New York. He threw his head back and laughed loudly. It was a practiced laugh, a fake laugh. I remembered when his laugh used to be a deep belly rumble, just like mine, but that was before he married Skylar. I took a step forward, wanting to congratulate him. It was a big night after all. But as I approached the circle, Terrence saw me. His eyes flickered. It was a micro-expression that lasted less than a second, but a father sees everything. It was shame. He quickly turned his shoulder, effectively blocking me from the group. He pointed at something across the room and led the investors away, leaving me standing there with my hand half raised. I lowered my hand slowly. The rejection stung worse than a physical slap. A young waiter walked by with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. He paused and looked at me. "Excuse me, sir, the staff entrance is through the kitchen in the back," he whispered politely. I looked at him. He thought I was a waiter. I wanted to laugh, but the sound died in my throat. "No, son, I am not staff," I said quietly. "I am just leaving." But I could not leave yet. My stomach gave a loud growl that embarrassed me. I had not eaten all day because I was too nervous about the speech I thought I would be asked to give. Nobody had asked me to speak. The buffet tables were set up along the far wall. It was a feast fit for royalty. Prime rib carving stations, towers of shrimp, majestic displays of imported cheese and trays of roasted vegetables. I made my way over to the food. The smell of roasted rosemary and garlic made my mouth water. I picked up a heavy porcelain plate. It felt cool and solid in my hands. I walked past the salads and the cold cuts. I wanted something warm. I wanted something that felt like a meal. I reached the carving station where a chef was slicing thick, juicy slabs of roast beef. "Just one slice, please," I said to the chef. He placed a beautiful piece of meat on my plate. I moved to the next tray, which held roasted potatoes. I reached for the silver tongs. Suddenly a hand shot out and snatched the tongs away from me. I looked up. It was Skylar, my daughter-in-law. She looked breathtaking in a silver gown that clung to her body like liquid mercury. Her blonde hair was swept up in an intricate bun, and diamonds sparkled at her throat. But her face was twisted into a mask of pure disgust. "What do you think you were doing?" she hissed. Her voice was low, but it carried a sharpness that cut through the low hum of jazz music. "I am getting dinner, Skylar," I said calmly. "I am hungry." She looked at my plate and then at my old suit. She wrinkled her nose as if she smelled something rotting. "Look at you," she said. "You look like you just crawled out of a sewer. This is a black tie event, Virgil, not a soup kitchen." I gripped my plate tighter. "This is my company anniversary, Skylar. I think I have earned a potato." She let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a sound devoid of any joy. "Your company," she mocked. "It is Terrence's company now. You are just a relic, a tax write-off. And frankly, you are embarrassing us. Look at these people. They are billionaires. And here you are, shuffling around in a suit that belongs in a museum, trying to hoard food like a starving animal." I felt heat rising up my neck. It was not anger, it was humiliation. I looked around. People nearby had stopped talking. A group of young executives formed the marketing department were watching us. They were holding their martini glasses and smirking. "I just want to eat," I said, my voice trembling slightly. Skylar leaned in close. The smell of her expensive Chanel perfume was suffocating. "Charity cases eat last," she said, loud enough for the entire table to hear. The words hung in the air. Charity case. The people around us giggled. It was a cruel high school sound. I looked past Skylar, hoping to find my son, hoping that Terrence would step in, that he would defend the man who worked double shifts at the docks to put him through private school. I saw him. Terrence was standing 10 feet away. He had heard it. I knew he heard it. He was looking right at me. For a moment, our eyes locked. I pleaded with him silently. "Say something, son. Tell her who I am." Terrence looked at his wife. Then he looked at his investors. And then he turned his back on me. He took a sip of his wine and pretended he saw nothing. My heart broke. It did not shatter loudly like glass. It just quietly crumbled into dust inside my chest. Skylar smiled triumphantly. She placed the tongs back on the tray and crossed her arms. "Put the plate down, Virgil," she said. "Go wait in the kitchen. I will have the staff pack you a doggy bag when the guests are done." I looked at the piece of roast beef on my plate. It suddenly looked unappetizing. It looked like ashes. I did not scream. I did not cause a scene. I did not give them the satisfaction of seeing the angry black man they expected me to be. I took a deep breath. I thought of Etta. I thought of how she used to tell me that dignity is the one thing nobody can take from you unless you give it to them. I gently placed the porcelain plate back onto the table. The clink of the china was the only sound in the silence. I straightened my tie. I looked Skylar dead in the eye. "Enjoy your meal," I said. I turned around and walked away. The walk to the exit felt like a mile. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could hear Skylar saying something about dementia and old age to the guests to excuse my behavior. "Oh, do not mind him," she said loudly. "He gets confused. We take care of him, but it is so hard." I pushed through the heavy revolving doors and stepped out into the cool Atlanta night air. The valet saw me coming. He was a young man, probably no older than 20. He looked at my ticket and then at me. "You are the Ford F-150, right, sir?" he asked. "Yes, son," I said. "That is me." He ran to get it. A minute later, my truck pulled up. It was a 1990 model, with faded red paint and a dent in the rear bumper from a loading dock accident years ago. It rattled as it idled. It looked ridiculous parked next to the line of Bentleys and Mercedes waiting for the other guests. The valet opened the door for me. He did not sneer like the others. "Nice truck, sir," he said. "They do not make them like this anymore." "No, son," I said, climbing into the worn leather seat. "They sure do not." I tipped him a $100 bill. It was the only money I would spend that night. I drove away from the Ritz-Carlton, leaving the glitter and the fake smiles behind me. I did not go home immediately. I drove to the industrial district. I drove to the massive 50-acre lot where Hightower Logistics stood. I parked outside the main gate and looked at the hundreds of trucks lined up in rows. I saw my name painted on the side of every trailer. Hightower. It meant something once. It meant strength. It meant integrity. Now it just meant a charity case. I sat in the dark cab of my truck, and I let the tears fall. I cried for the son I had lost. I cried for the wife who was not there to hold my hand. But mostly I cried because I knew what I had to do the next morning. Skylar called me a charity case. She thought I was powerless. She thought I was just an old man living off their generosity. She forgot one thing. She forgot to check whose name was on the deed to the land. I wiped my eyes. The sadness was fading, replacing itself with a cold, hard resolve. I started the engine. The old Ford roared to life. "Charity cases eat last," Schuyler said. Well, tomorrow, nobody was going to eat. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of my small wooden house in the suburbs. It was a modest place with a porch that creaked when it rained, and a garden where I grew tomatoes and collard greens. It was nothing like the glass and steel fortress my son lived in, but it was home. It was the house Etta and I bought 30 years ago, and I never had the heart to leave it. The silence in the kitchen was heavy. Usually I enjoyed the quiet of the morning, but today the silence felt lonely. It felt like the aftermath of a storm. I stood by the counter brewing my coffee. I like it black and strong enough to wake up a dead man. The smell of roasted beans filled the small room, and for a moment, I closed my eyes and pretended everything was normal. I pretended that I had not been humiliated in front of 300 people the night before. I pretended that my daughter-in-law had not called me a charity case. But when I opened my eyes, the reality was still there, sitting heavy in my chest like a stone. I took my mug and walked over to the small shrine I had set up on the mantel. It was just a simple wooden frame holding a black and white photograph of Etta. She was smiling that wide, gap-toothed smile that used to make my knees weak. In the photo, she was leaning against the grill of our very first truck. It was a beat-up 1978 Mack truck that smelled of diesel and stale tobacco when we bought it. I ran my rough thumb over the glass. I remembered that day clearly. We had scraped together every penny we had. Etta had sold her grandmother's jewelry, and I had worked double shifts at the dock for 2 years. We walked onto that dealership lot with our heads held high, even though the salesman looked at us with skepticism. He saw a young black couple with worn-out shoes and assumed we were lost. But Etta slammed an envelope of cash onto his desk and told him we were not leaving without the keys. That truck was our baby. We slept in the cabin during long hauls. We ate sandwiches wrapped in wax paper while driving through the night to make a delivery on time. We built Hightower Logistics mile by mile. We missed birthdays and holidays and anniversaries just so we could give Terrence a life where he would never have to sleep in a truck. I looked at Etta's face in the photo. "We did it for him, Etta," I whispered to the empty room. "We gave him the world on a silver platter, and now he is too ashamed to even look at me." The contrast between my memories and the present day was sharp enough to cut. I gave Terrence a company worth millions, and he treats it like a toy. I gave him an education, and he uses it to look down on people like me. I felt a tear prick the corner of my eye, but I blinked it away. I was done crying. Sadness was a luxury I could no longer afford. Suddenly, the vibration of my phone against the wooden table shattered the silence. The buzzing sound was aggressive and demanding. I walked over to the table and looked at the screen. It was a text message from Terrence. My heart skipped a beat. For a split second, the father in me hoped. I hoped it was an apology. I hoped he would say, "Dad, I am so sorry about Schuyler. Dad, please forgive me for turning my back. Dad, let me make it up to you." I picked up the phone with trembling hands and unlocked the screen. The message was short. It was brutal in its lack of emotion. "The business needs your investment for the East Coast expansion. Schuyler says the bank is stalling. Sign the guarantee papers today so we can move forward." That was it. No, "Hello, Dad." No, "How are you?" No, "Sorry my wife humiliated you." Just a demand for money. Just a demand for me to risk the last of my personal savings to fund their vanity project. I stared at the screen for a long time. The trembling in my hands stopped. It was replaced by a cold, steady rage. They did not see me as a father. They did not even see me as a human being. To them, I was just a wallet. I was an ATM machine that they could kick whenever they needed cash. I did not reply. I placed the phone down gently. I walked over to my Rolodex and flipped through the cards until I found the number I needed. Alana Hart. Alana was one of the few people left who called me Mr. Hightower with genuine respect. She was a brilliant attorney, a shark in a skirt, who had been with me since the days when our office was a closet in the back of a warehouse. I dialed her number. She picked up on the first ring. "Mr. Hightower," she said, her voice warm and professional. "To what do I owe the pleasure this early in the morning?" "Alana," I said, my voice sounding like gravel, "I need you to come over." "Is everything all right, Virgil?" she asked, dropping the formality. "You sound different." "I need you to bring the financial books, Alana," I said, staring out the window at my garden. "Not the summary reports Terrence sends me. I want the raw data. I want to see every transaction from the last 24 months, every receipt, every withdrawal, every credit card swipe. There was a pause on the other end. Alana was smart. She knew what this meant. I will be there in 30 minutes, she said. I will bring the red binders. 30 minutes later, a black sedan pulled up into my gravel driveway. Alana stepped out looking sharp in a navy blue suit, holding 2 thick leather binders. She did not look at my old house with disdain. She looked at it with familiarity. She walked up the porch steps and I held the door open for her. Coffee? I asked. Black, please, she said, sitting down at my small kitchen table. She spread the documents out across the wooden surface. The smell of paper and ink filled the room, mixing with the coffee. I have been waiting for you to ask for these, Virgil, she said softly. I tried to warn you last quarter, but you said you wanted to trust your son. I know, I said, sitting opposite her. I was a fool. Show me. Alana opened the first binder. Her manicured finger traced a line of numbers. Here is the operating budget for the last fiscal year, she began. Revenue is down 15%, which is understandable given the market, but expenses are up 40%. 40%, I repeated. How is that possible? We have not bought any new trucks. Alana flipped a page. Look at the category labeled Client Acquisition and Entertainment. I looked at the numbers. They were staggering. $50,000 in 1 month, $60,000 in the next. I looked at the itemized list. Hermes, Chanel, Cartier, 5-star spa retreats in Aspen, private jet charters to Miami. These are not client gifts, Alana said, her voice tight, unless your clients are teenage girls who like designer handbags. Skylar has been using the corporate account as her personal piggy bank. She lists them as gifts for partners, but there are no partners receiving them. I felt the bile rising in my throat. I worked 16-hour days driving through snowstorms to earn that money. And she was spending it on purses. But that is not the worst part, Virgil, Alana said, closing the first binder and opening the second one. This is the payroll ledger. My stomach dropped. Payroll was sacred. You do not mess with a man's paycheck. Look at the last 60 days, Alana said, pointing to the rows of red ink. Delayed, partial payment, pending. My eyes widened. They haven't not paid the drivers, I whispered. Not fully, Alana confirmed. For the last 2 months, the drivers have been getting only half their checks. Terrence sent out a memo blaming a banking error. He told them to be patient. Patient, I roared, slamming my hand down on the table. My coffee mug jumped and spilled a little brown liquid onto the wood. Big Mike has 3 kids in college, I said, my voice shaking with fury. Old Sam needs insulin. These men have been with me for 20 years. They are driving 10,000-pound missiles down the highway on half pay, while my daughter-in-law is buying $50,000 purses. Alana nodded solemnly. It is a lawsuit waiting to happen, Virgil. If the union finds out, the strike will kill the company in a week. Terrence knows about this, I asked, though I already knew the answer. He signs the checks, Virgil, Alana said gently. He knows. He is robbing Peter to pay Paul. And Paul is, his wife is Wardrobe. I sat back in my chair. The image of Terrence at the party, laughing with his wine glass, flashed in my mind. He was standing there in a tuxedo, pretending to be a tycoon, while his workers were struggling to put food on the table. He is not just incompetent, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. He is a thief. He stole from the men who built his inheritance. I looked at Alana. Her eyes were full of sympathy, but she was waiting for my command. She knew the old Virgil Hightower. She knew the man who once drove a truck through a hurricane to deliver medical supplies because he gave his word. I looked down at my hands. They were calloused and scarred. These were hands that worked. Skylar called me a charity case. She thought I was weak. She thought I was just an old man sitting on a pile of money waiting to die. They had awoken a sleeping giant. I closed the binder. The sound was like a gunshot in the small kitchen. Alana, I said, looking her dead in the eye. Yes, Virgil. Get the paperwork ready. What paperwork? She asked. The land, I said. The warehouse. The parking lot. Who owns it, Alana? You do, she said, a small smile playing on her lips. It is under the Hightower Real Estate Holding LLC. You never transferred the deeds to the logistics company. You just leased it to them. And what are the terms of that lease? I asked, leaning forward. Month to month, she said. Terminable by either party with 48 hours notice. I clenched my fist. The knuckles turned white. "Draft the notice," I said. Alana raised an eyebrow. "You are going to evict them." "I am not just going to evict them, Alana. I am going to remind them who built the roof over their heads." I picked up my phone again. The text message from Terrence was still there on the screen. The demand for money, the lack of respect. "Charity cases eat last," Skylar had said. Well, I thought, let us see how they eat when they do not have a kitchen. "Do it," I told Alana. "Terminate the lease." "And Alana?" "Yes, Virgil. Make sure the notice is delivered by a courier. I want a signature. I want them to know exactly when the clock starts ticking." Alana closed her briefcase and stood up. She looked at me with a mixture of pride and sadness. "It is going to get ugly, Virgil," she warned. "They will fight dirty." I looked at Etta's photo one last time. "Let them fight," I said. "I have been fighting my whole life. They have never fought for anything a day in theirs." I stood up and walked to the window, watching Alana drive away. The sun was fully up now, but the world looked different to me. The sadness was gone. The hesitation was gone. I was no longer just a father. I was the chairman, and school was about to be in session. I drove my battered Ford truck into the parking lot of Hightower Logistics. It was the same lot where I used to park my very first delivery van 40 years ago. Back then, the asphalt was cracked, and weeds grew through the concrete, but to me, it looked like a field of dreams. Now the lot was freshly paved and lined with imported palm trees that looked out of place in the Georgia heat. I parked my truck in the furthest corner away from the rows of shiny luxury sedans that belonged to the new executives. I did not want my rusted bumper to offend their delicate sensibilities. I walked toward the main entrance. The building was a structure of steel and glass that I had commissioned 10 years ago. It was supposed to be a monument to hard work. Today it felt like a fortress built to keep me out. I pushed through the heavy glass doors and the blast of air conditioning hit me. It was cold, too cold. It smelled of lemon pledge and artificial flowers. The smell of diesel and coffee that used to permeate the lobby was gone. I looked toward the wall behind the reception desk. For a decade, a large oil painting of me and Etta had hung there. It was a painting commissioned by the employees for my 60th birthday. In the picture, I was standing tall with my hand on Etta's shoulder, and we were looking toward the horizon. It was the heart of this building. My steps faltered. The painting was gone. In its place hung a massive canvas, covered in chaotic splashes of red and black paint. It was abstract. It was modern. It was meaningless. It looked like someone had spilled ink and called it art. I walked up to the reception desk. The young woman sitting there was new. She had bright purple nails and was typing furiously on her phone. She did not look up. "Excuse me, miss," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the sterile lobby. She glanced up, annoyed. "Deliveries are in the back, sir." "I am not a delivery man," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I am Virgil Hightower." Her eyes widened. She dropped her phone. "Oh my God, Mr. Hightower. I am so sorry. I did not recognize you. Mr. Terrence did not say you were coming in today." I looked around the lobby. I saw old Mrs. Gable walking through the hallway with a stack of files. She had been my head accountant for 20 years. When she saw me, she stopped. She did not smile. She looked down at the floor and hurried away, as if being seen with me would get her in trouble. That was when I knew. This was no longer my company. It was occupied territory. "Where is the painting?" I asked the receptionist, pointing to the red and black monstrosity. She looked nervous. "Oh, Mrs. Hightower. I mean Skylar. She had it moved to storage last week. She said the lobby needed a fresh energy. She said the old portrait was too dark." Too dark. I knew exactly what that meant. It had nothing to do with the lighting. I felt a tightening in my chest, but I pushed it down. "Call my son," I said. "Tell him I am coming up." I did not wait for her to answer. I walked toward the elevators. The steel doors closed, shutting out the cold lobby, but trapping me in a silence that felt even heavier. I watched the numbers climb. Floor 1, Floor 2, Floor 3, the executive suite. I stepped out onto the third floor. The hallway was lined with glass walls. You could see into every office. It was designed for transparency, but now it just felt like a fishbowl. I walked straight to the main conference room at the end of the hall. Skylar and Terrence were already there. They were sitting at the long mahogany table, the same table where I had negotiated contracts that saved this town during the recession. Skylar was sitting in my chair. The chairman is chair. She had her legs crossed and was examining her manicure. Terrence was pacing back and forth, looking pale and sweaty. When I opened the door, the air inside felt suffocating. "Well, look who decided to show up," Skylar said, without looking up from her nails. "We were just betting on whether you had the guts to face us after your little tantrum last night." I ignored her. I looked at my son. "Terrence," I said, "we need to talk." Terrence stopped pacing. He looked at me, but his eyes could not hold mine. He looked at my flannel shirt and my work boots. He winced. "Dad, why are you dressed like that?" he asked, his voice thin. "We have clients coming in an hour. You look like you just came from a shift at the warehouse." "I did come from the warehouse," I lied. "I was checking on the drivers." "Something you haven't not done in months," Skylar laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound. "Oh, spare us the working-class hero act, Virgil. It is pathetic. Sit down. We have business to discuss." She slid a thick stack of documents across the polished table. The papers stopped right at the edge in front of the empty seat opposite her. "What is this?" I asked, remaining standing. "It is the loan guarantee," Terrence said, stepping forward. He tried to put a hand on my shoulder, but I took a step back. He flinched. "Dad, listen to me. The bank is ready to approve the $5 million for the East Coast expansion, but they need collateral. They need you to pledge your personal assets, the land, the savings, everything." "Why?" I asked. "The company has enough assets to secure a loan." "Unless the company is empty." Terrence looked at Skylar. She gave him a sharp nod. "Dad, it is not empty," Terrence stammered. It is tied up. We are modernizing. We are rebranding. Hightower Logistics is an old name. It sounds dusty. We want to pivot. We want to be a tech-forward logistics solution. But that takes capital. Rebranding, I repeated. "Is that why you took down my picture? Because I am too dusty for your tech-forward solution?" Skylar slammed her hand on the table. The diamonds on her fingers clicked against the wood. "Stop making this about your ego, Virgil," she snapped. "This is business. You are 68 years old. What are you going to do with that money? Take it to the grave? You are hoarding resources that we could use to build a legacy." "I built the legacy, Skylar," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "This table, those trucks, the roof over your head. I built it all with sweat and blood. I did not build it with loans and lies." Terrence looked desperate. "Dad, please. If we do not get this loan, the bank will start asking questions. We have some liquidity issues. Short term. Just short term. But if you sign this, we are safe." Skylar has a vision. She is going to take us global. I looked at the papers. I saw the numbers. $5 million. If I signed this and they defaulted, I would lose everything. My home, my pension, the land, Etta is garden. And I knew they would default. I had seen the books. I knew about the purses and the trips to Aspen. I looked at Terrence. I saw the fear in his eyes. He was not asking for an investment. He was asking me to bail him out of a hole he dug himself. "I will not sign," I said. The silence in the room was absolute. "What did you say?" Skylar asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "I said no," I repeated. "I will not pledge my assets to fund your lifestyle, Skylar, and I will not help you bury this company under a mountain of debt." Skylar stood up. She was tall in her heels, but she still had to look up to meet my eyes. Her face twisted into a mask of pure malice. "You listen to me, you stubborn old man," she hissed. "You think you have a choice. You do not. You are a minority shareholder. You are nothing. We are doing you a favor by letting you be involved." I turned to leave. I had heard enough. "If you walk out that door, Virgil," Skylar shouted, her voice cracking with rage. "If you walk out that door, you are cut off. Completely." I stopped. I turned back slowly. "Cut off?" I asked. "Yes," Skylar said, a cruel smile spreading across her face. "We pay your health insurance. We pay for that rundown truck you drive. We pay for your club membership. I will cut it all. I will leave you destitute." I almost laughed. "I pay for my own truck, Skylar, and I haven't not been to a club in 20 years. "Then I will take something else," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Terrence and I are trying for a baby. Did he tell you that?" Terrence looked down at the floor. "A grandchild," Skylar said, letting the words hang in the air. "You want to be a grandfather, do not you, Virgil? You want to bounce a baby on your knee and tell them stories about the good old days. Well, if you do not sign that paper, you will never see that child. Not once. You will die alone in that wooden shack of yours, and your grandchild will not even know your name. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. It was a low blow, the lowest. Etta and I had always dreamed of a house full of grandchildren. "Terrence," I said, looking at my son, "are you going to let her speak like that?" Terrence looked up. His eyes were wet. "Dad, just sign the paper, please. Do not make this hard. She is right. You are holding us back. You are a historical burden on this company. We are trying to fly, and you are an anchor." Historical burden. The words hit me harder than any physical blow. My own son. The boy I taught to ride a bike. The boy I held when he cried over a broken toy. He saw me as a burden. I looked at the loan document one last time. I looked at the pen sitting there waiting for my signature. I took a deep breath. The anger inside me solidified into something colder, something harder. It was the resolve of a man who realized he had nothing left to lose, because he had already lost the only thing that mattered. His family's respect. "You are right, Terrence," I said, my voice steady and calm. "I am a burden, and it is time I removed myself." I did not pick up the pen. I did not scream. I looked at Skylar, who was smirking, thinking she had won. I looked at Terrence, who was looking at the papers with relief. They thought I was giving in. They thought I was surrendering. I turned around and walked toward the glass door. "Where are you going?" Skylar demanded. "Sign the damn paper." I opened the door. I looked back at them one last time. "I am going to remove the anchor," I said. "Good luck flying." I walked out of the conference room. I walked down the glass hallway past the staring employees. I did not look back. Skylar's threats echoed in my mind. She was going to cut me off. She was going to keep my future grandchildren from me. She thought she held all the cards. But as I stepped into the elevator, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I looked at the contact for Alana Hart. They called me a burden. They called me a charity case. They forgot that I was also the landlord. The elevator doors closed, severing the connection between me and the son I loved. I closed my eyes for a brief moment to mourn the loss. But when the doors opened on the ground floor, I stepped out with a new purpose. I walked past the empty space where my portrait used to hang. I did not need a painting to know who I was. I was Virgil Hightower, and I was about to teach them a lesson they would never forget. I drove straight from the office to the only place where I could find silence that did not feel like loneliness. The cemetery was on the other side of town, tucked away behind a grove of ancient oak trees that had stood guard over the dead for a century. The afternoon sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows across the manicured grass. I parked my old truck near the back gate and walked the familiar path to Etta's grave. The granite headstone was simple, just the way she wanted it. It had her name, her dates, and the inscription. She built bridges where there were walls. I stood there for a long time, staring at the gray stone, letting the heat of the Georgia afternoon soak into my tired bones. I did not bring flowers this time. I brought a confession. "Etta," I whispered into the wind, "I have to break him." A blue jay landed on the headstone, chirping loudly before flying off. It felt like she was listening. "I promised you I would look out for him," I continued, my voice thick with emotion. "I promised I would make sure he never had to struggle the way we did. And I kept that promise, Etta. I kept it too well. We gave him the shade, but we never let him feel the heat of the sun, so he never grew deep roots. Now the first strong wind is going to blow him over." I knelt down and brushed a few dry leaves off the grass. My knees cracked a reminder that I was not a young man anymore. "He is drowning, Etta," I said. "He is drowning in debt and arrogance, and that woman is holding his head under the water. If I pull him out now, he will just jump back in. I have to let him hit the bottom. I have to let him feel the mud in his lungs." I closed my eyes, imagining her face. I imagined her telling me to be strong. Etta was the soft one, but she was also the one who made me fire my own brother when he was stealing from the register back in '85. She knew that enabling a thief was the same as being one. "I am going to take it all away, Etta," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "The land, the safety net, the pride. I am going to strip him down to nothing so he can remember who he is. Forgive me, my love, but I have to hurt our boy to save him." I stayed there until the sun went down, until the crickets started their nightly chorus. When I finally stood up, the heavy weight in my chest had shifted. It was still there, but it was no longer crushing me. It had become a weapon. I walked back to my truck, my steps heavy but steady. I was ready for war. The next morning, the air in my kitchen felt different. It was charged with static electricity, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. I went through my routine mechanically. Coffee, black, toast, dry. I sat at my small wooden table, the same table where Terrence used to do his homework while I went over shipping manifests. My phone was sitting on the table, screen down. I knew it was coming. At 8:30 sharp, the phone buzzed. It vibrated against the wood, sound angry and impatient. I picked it up. It was a text from Terrence. "Dad, stop being dramatic. Skylar is really upset about yesterday. You embarrassed her in front of the staff. We need that signature by noon today or the deal falls through. Don't be selfish. Think about the family legacy." I stared at the words. Don't be selfish. The audacity took my breath away. This was the boy whose college tuition cost more than my first house. This was the man who drove a Porsche I paid for to a job I gave him, and he was calling me selfish. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not ask why I left. He just demanded. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 8:32. Alana would be arriving at their office right about now. I opened the messaging app. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I did not type a paragraph. I did not try to explain myself. I did not try to reason with a man who was deaf to reason. I typed 2 words, all caps. Lease terminated. I hit send. Then I attached a photo. It was a picture of the legal notice Alana had drafted the night before. A formal notice to quit premises, stamped and notarized. I placed the phone back on the table and took a sip of my coffee. It tasted bitter, but it was the most satisfying sip I had taken in years. I could only imagine the scene unfolding across town in that glass-walled office. In my mind, I saw it as clearly as if I were standing there. Terrence was probably sitting in his ergonomic leather chair, holding his phone, frowning in confusion. He would read the message once, then twice, thinking it was a joke. He would show it to Skylar. "What does this mean?" Skylar would ask, snatching the phone from his hand. "Lease terminated." "What lease?" Then the intercom would buzz. The receptionist, the one with the purple nails, would sound panicked. "Mr. Hightower, there is a courier here with a legal packet. He says it is urgent, and Mrs. Hart is with him." Alana would walk in, tall and imposing, carrying a thick envelope. She would not sit down. She would not accept water. She would slide the envelope across the mahogany table, right over the spot where Skylar had slammed her hand the day before. "This is a formal notice of lease termination," Alana would say, her voice cool and professional. "You have 48 hours to vacate the property located at 500 Industrial Parkway. That includes the warehouse, the administrative building, and the parking lot." Terrence would laugh nervously. "Alana, stop it. This is ridiculous. The company owns this building. Dad built it." And that was the trap. That was the detail they had missed in their arrogance. "No, Terrence," Alana would correct him, pulling out the deed. "The company, Hightower Logistics, owns the trucks. It owns the computers and the furniture. But the land underneath it, the 50 acres of prime industrial real estate, the concrete foundation, the parking lot where 500 semi-trucks are currently parked, that belongs to Hightower Real Estate Holdings, LLC. And who owns that LLC?" Skylar would demand, her face turning pale. Alana would smile a shark smile. "Mr. Virgil Hightower, sole proprietor." I sat in my kitchen, tracing the grain of the wood on my table. I knew exactly what they were realizing in that moment. When I handed over the company 5 years ago, I kept the land. It was my insurance policy. It was Eda's idea, actually. She said, "Virgil, give him the steering wheel, but you keep the road. If he drives reckless, you close the road." I had leased the land to the company for a nominal fee of $1 a year. It was a handshake deal between father and son. But on paper, it was a month-to-month commercial lease. Standard contract law in Georgia states that a month-to-month lease can be terminated by the landlord with notice. I had given them notice. I checked my phone again. It was blowing up now. 5 missed calls from Terrence, 2 from Skylar, a voicemail that started with screaming and ended with sobbing. I did not answer. I pictured Skylar grabbing the contract, her eyes scanning the pages, desperately looking for a loophole. She was smart enough to know what this meant. Without a certified parking lot for the fleet, they would lose their Department of Transportation operating license immediately. You cannot park 518-wheelers on the street. It is illegal. Without a warehouse, they had nowhere to sort the cargo. In 48 hours, the logistics empire they were so proud of would be nothing more than a fleet of trucks with nowhere to go. The phone rang again. It was Terrence. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. I stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the world was calm. The birds were singing. My neighbor was mowing his lawn. It was a beautiful day. But across town, a storm had just made landfall. They wanted to cut me off. They wanted to erase me. They forgot that you cannot erase the foundation without bringing down the whole house. I looked at the photo of Etta on the mantle. Phase 1 is done, I told her. Now we wait for the crash. I went to the closet and pulled out my old work boots, the ones with the steel toes. I had a feeling I would be needing them soon. Because when a building collapses, there is always a lot of debris to clear away. And I was the only one who knew how to clean up a mess this big. 48 hours. That was all the time I gave them. To a civilian, 48 hours might seem like a long time. It is enough time to binge watch a show or take a weekend trip. But in the world of logistics, 48 hours is a blink of an eye. It is a heartbeat, and I had just stopped the heart of Hightower Logistics. I sat on my front porch in my rocking chair with a phone in my hand. I did not call my son. There was nothing left to say to him. Instead, I dialed a number that I knew by heart, a number that belonged to a man named Big Mike. Mike was the head of the local truckers union. He was a mountain of a man, with hands the size of shovels, and a loyalty that could not be bought. We had driven routes together back in the 80s, when sleeping in the cab was a luxury and a hot shower was a miracle. Big Mike answered on the first ring. His voice sounded like gravel tumbling in a cement mixer. "Virgil," he said, "I heard rumors. Is it true? Did you really pull the lease?" "It is true, Mike," I said, looking out at my garden. "The boy lost his way, and that woman he married thinks she can treat our people like dirt. She cut the payroll, Mike." "I heard," Mike grunted. "The boys are restless, Virgil. They are talking about walking off. But they are scared. They need the miles. They have mortgages." "I know, Mike," I said, leaning back in my chair. "That is why I am calling. I am opening up the old south lot. You know, the one on River Road. It is empty. It is paved. And it belongs to me, personally." There was a pause on the line. I could hear the sounds of a busy dispatch radio in the background. "What are you saying, Virgil?" Mike asked. "I am saying tell the boys to move the fleet," I said. "Tell them the lease at the main headquarters is void as of tomorrow morning. If they park there, they are trespassing. If they park on the street, they get fined. But the south lot is open. And for any driver who worked for me before the takeover, parking is free." "Free," Mike repeated. "Virgil, that is prime real estate. You could charge a fortune." "It is not about the money, Mike," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "It is about respect. Tell them to move the trucks, all of them, tonight." I hung up the phone. I did not need to do anything else. In the trucking world, word travels faster than fiber optic cables. I drove my pickup truck down to a hill that overlooked the main Hightower Logistics facility. I parked and turned off my headlights. It was 10 at night. The yard should have been sleeping. It should have been a quiet sea of parked giants waiting for the morning shift. Instead, it looked like an anthill that had been kicked. I watched as headlights flickered on one by one. It started with a few trucks in the front row, then the second row, then the third. The deep rumble of diesel engines began to fill the night air. It was a low-frequency vibration that I could feel in my chest. It was the sound of power. It was the sound of the workforce taking back control. One by one, the massive 18-wheelers began to roll toward the gate. They did not move fast. They moved with a heavy, deliberate purpose. It was a river of steel and chrome, flowing out of the yard that Terrence thought he owned. I watched as 500 trucks exited the facility. 500 drivers who chose loyalty over a paycheck that might bounce. They were leaving the shiny glass office building behind and heading toward a vacant lot with no amenities just because I asked them to. By midnight, the Hightower Logistics main yard was empty. It was a ghost town. The only thing left was the oil stains on the pavement and the silence, a terrifying, absolute silence. I sat in my truck and watched the last taillights fade into the distance. My heart ached for the disruption this would cause, but I knew it was necessary. You cannot fix a broken bone without resetting it, and resetting it always hurts. While the yard was silent, the scene inside the executive offices the next morning was anything but. I did not need to be there to see it. I knew the rhythm of that office better than my own heartbeat, and I knew exactly what happened when the rhythm failed. The phones would have started ringing at 7 in the morning. It starts with the dispatchers. They come in with their coffees, ready to assign routes. They look at the screens, they look at the GPS trackers, and they see that every single asset has moved. The trucks are not in the bay. They are 5 miles away at the south lot. Then the customers start calling. These are not just people waiting for an Amazon package. These are factory managers waiting for raw materials. These are grocery chains waiting for produce. These are hospitals waiting for supplies. In logistics, timing is everything. A delay of 1 hour costs thousands. A delay of 1 day costs millions. I could imagine the reception area. The purple-nailed receptionist would be overwhelmed. The switchboard would be lit up like a Christmas tree, every line blinking red. Where is my shipment? Why is the driver not at the dock? I am canceling my contract. I am suing for breach of service. The voices on the other end would not be polite. They would be screaming. And in the middle of this hurricane stood Skylar. She would have stormed out of her office hearing the commotion. She was wearing another one of her designer dresses, probably thinking today was just another day to play boss. She did not understand that the drivers were the blood of the company. She thought they were just gears in a machine she could neglect. "Stop that ringing," she would scream at the terrified staff. "Just unplug the phones if you have to, but you cannot unplug a disaster." She would grab a manager by the arm, a man named David who had been with me for 10 years. "Where are the trucks, David?" she would hiss, her face contorted with panic. "Why are the screens red?" David would look at her with the exhaustion of a man who hasn't not been paid properly in 2 months. "They moved, ma'am," he would say. "The lease was terminated. The drivers moved the fleet to Mr. Hightower's private lot to avoid impoundment. We cannot dispatch them. We do not have access to the keys. The drivers took them." "Fire them," Skylar would shriek. "Fire them all. Hire new ones." David would laugh, a sad, tired laugh. "Fire 500 certified commercial drivers in the middle of a labor shortage. Ma'am, with all due respect, you could not replace them in 5 years, let alone 5 hours. And right now, we are in breach of contract with every major client in the state." I could see her then, the realization hitting her, the control slipping away. She was used to getting her way by yelling or flirting or spending money. None of those things work on a supply chain breakdown. The logistics world does not care about your manicure. It cares about results, and she had none. She would run back to her office, slamming the door, but the glass walls offered no privacy. The employees would see her pacing. They would see her throwing files. They would see the captain of the ship losing her mind while the water rose around her ankles. This was the moment the facade cracked, the moment the polished veneer of the power couple shattered, revealing the rot underneath. Terrence would have arrived late. That was his habit lately. He strolled in carrying a latte, unaware that his empire had evaporated overnight. He walked into the chaos, expecting deference but finding panic. He opened the door to the executive suite and found his wife standing by the window. She was not looking at the view. She was looking at the empty parking lot below, the vast acres of gray concrete where the trucks used to be. Skylar Terrence would say, putting his coffee down, "What is going on? Why are the phones going crazy?" She turned on him. It was not the turn of a loving wife. It was the strike of a viper. "You idiot!" she screamed. Her voice was so loud it penetrated the soundproof glass. The entire floor went silent. Everyone stopped typing. Everyone stopped answering the screaming customers. They all looked up. "You told me the company owned everything," Skylar yelled. "You told me you were the CEO. You told me the old man was just a figurehead." Terrence stammered, backing away from her. "I am the CEO, Skylar. I own the operations." Operations. Skylar mocked, grabbing a heavy crystal paperweight from the desk and hurling it across the room. It shattered against the wall, leaving a dent in the drywall. "Operations mean nothing without the land, Terrence. Your father owns the ground we walk on. He owns the warehouse. He owns the parking lot. He just evicted us." Terrence looked at the empty lot. His face went pale. He finally understood the text message. "Lease terminated." He thought it was a bluff. "Why did not you tell me she advanced on him?" Poking a manicured finger into his chest. "Why did not you tell me he held the deed? I would have played nice. I would have waited until he died. But no, you let me humiliate him. You let me poke the bear because you said he was toothless." Terrence looked at his wife, really looked at her. For the first time in 3 years, he did not see the beauty queen he had married. He did not see the woman who charmed his friends at parties. He saw a monster. He saw a woman who just admitted she would have waited for his father to die to steal everything. "I thought you loved me," Terrence whispered, his voice trembling. "I thought we were partners. Love?" Skylar laughed a cruel, harsh sound. "I loved the lifestyle, Terrence. I loved the potential. I loved the idea of being the queen of an empire. But look at you. You are not a king. You are a little boy, playing dress-up in your daddy's suit. And now daddy has taken away your toys." She grabbed her purse, the Hermes bag she bought with the stolen payroll money. "Fix this," she spat at him. "Go crawl back to him. Cry. Beg. I do not care what you do. But if I lose my house because of your incompetence, I will destroy you." She stormed out of the office, pushing past the stunned employees. Terrence stood alone in the middle of the wreckage. The phones were still ringing. The clients were still screaming. The drivers were gone, and for the first time he realized that the silence from his father was louder than all of it combined. I was sitting in my garden, miles away, pruning my roses, when I felt a shift in the wind. I did not smile. I did not celebrate. I just kept working. I knew the phone would ring soon. I knew the begging would start. But I also knew that some lessons have to be burned into the soul before they are learned. And the fire was just getting started. The rain came down hard that night. It was not a cleansing rain. It was a deluge that hammered against the tin roof of my small house like 1,000 angry fists. The wind howled through the cracks in the window frames, causing the old wood to groan in protest. I sat in my armchair in the living room with the lights off. My hands were gripping the armrest so tightly that my knuckles ached. I knew he was coming. A father always knows. At 2 in the morning, headlights cut through the darkness of my front yard. They were bright, blinding LED lights that belonged to a German-engineered machine. I heard the engine of the Porsche revving aggressively before the engine cut out. Then came the slamming of a car door. Footsteps stomped up the wooden steps of my porch. Heavy, frantic footsteps. Then the pounding started. It was not a knock. It was an assault. "Open the door, Dad," Terrence screamed. His voice was raw and cracked, breaking through the sound of the rain. "Open the damn door right now." I did not move. I sat perfectly still in the darkness, staring at the outline of the door. The wood vibrated with every blow. "I know you are in there," Terrence yelled. "I see your truck. You cannot hide from me. You ruined everything. Do you hear me? You ruined my life." He kicked the door. The sound echoed through the empty house like a gunshot. "Fix it," he begged, his tone shifting suddenly from rage to desperation. "Just fix it, Dad. Call Big Mike. Tell him to bring the trucks back." Skylar is going to leave my dad. She packed a bag. She is staying at a hotel. She said she won't not come back until I fix this. I closed my eyes. Tears leaked out and rolled down my cheeks, getting lost in my gray beard. It killed me to hear him like this. He sounded exactly like he did when he was 5 years old and dropped his ice cream cone in the dirt. He was wailing. He was blaming the universe for gravity. He wanted me to buy him another one. He wanted me to make the bad feelings go away. But he was not 5 years old anymore. He was 34, and the toy he had broken was a multi-million-dollar company that employed hundreds of families. "You are selfish," Terrence screamed again, pounding his fists against the wood until I was sure his skin was breaking. "You are a selfish, jealous old man. You could not stand seeing me succeed, could you? You could not stand that I took the company to the next level. So you pulled the rug out. You want me to crawl. Is that it? You want me to beg?" He was not making sense. The alcohol in his voice was evident. He was slurring his words, mixing insults with pleas. "I am the CEO," he shouted at the neighborhood, at the rain, at God. "I am Terrence Hightower. You cannot lock me out. I own this town." "No, son," I whispered to the empty room. "You do not own anything, not even yourself." The neighbors' lights were turning on. I saw the flicker of curtains moving across the street. Mrs. Jenkins, who had known Terrence since he was in diapers, was probably watching. The shame burned in my chest. Not for me, but for him. He was out there in his $3,000 custom suit, getting soaked to the bone, screaming like a lunatic on the porch of the father he was ashamed of. "Open the door," he sobbed, sliding down against the wood. Please, Dad. I do not have anywhere else to go. The bank locked the house. Skylar locked the hotel room. Please, just let me in. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to get up. My legs twitched, wanting to run to the door. I wanted to open it. I wanted to pull him out of the rain and wrap him in a towel. I wanted to make him hot cocoa and tell him I would fix it. That is what I had done his whole life. When he crashed his first car, I paid for it. When he failed failing math, I hired a tutor. When he got into trouble in college, I called in favors. I had spent his entire life paving the road so he would never trip. And because he never tripped, he never learned how to get up. I gripped the chair harder. I bit my lip until I tasted copper. No. If I opened that door now, I would be killing him. I would be teaching him that consequences are just suggestions. I would be teaching him that he can abuse people and still get a warm bed. I reached for the phone on the side table. My hand shook violently. I dialed 3 digits. 911. The dispatcher answered. What is your emergency? There is a man on my porch, I said, my voice trembling. He is intoxicated and aggressive. He is trying to break down my door. Do you know the individual, sir? There was a long silence. The pounding on the door had stopped, replaced by soft, pathetic sobbing. Yes, I whispered. It is my son. I hung up the phone and dropped it on the floor. I pulled my knees up to my chest and rocked back and forth in the dark, waiting for the end of the world. It did not take long. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder and louder until they drowned out the sound of the rain. Blue and red lights exploded through my front window, painting my living room in a chaotic strobe of color. I stood up and moved to the window, peering through the slats of the blinds. 2 police cruisers skidded to a halt in front of my house. Officers stepped out, shining flashlights onto my porch. Sir, step away from the door, one officer commanded. I saw Terrence stand up. He looked small in the glare of the lights. His expensive suit was ruined, plastered to his body by the rain. His hair was matted. He put his hands up, shielding his eyes from the flashlights. That is my dad's house, Terrence slurred, pointing a shaking finger at the door. I live here. Well, I used to live here. I am the CEO. Ask him. Sir, turn around and place your hands behind your back. No, Terrence shouted, stepping forward. You do not understand. I need to talk to him. Dad, tell them. I watched as the officers moved in. They were professional, but firm. They grabbed Terrence's arms. He struggled. He tried to pull away, screaming my name. Dad, help me, he screamed. Dad, do not let them take me. They pushed him against the hood of the police car. I heard the distinct metallic click of handcuffs. It was a sound that finalized everything. My son. The boy I had dreamed of sending to Harvard. The boy who was supposed to be the first Hightower to never know the inside of a jail cell. He was crying now. Uncontrollable heaving sobs that shook his entire body. The officer guided him into the back of the cruiser. As they ducked his head to put him in, he looked at the house. He looked right at the window where I was standing. The strobe lights illuminated his face. It was a mask of betrayal and shock. He could not believe I had done it. He could not believe that Virgil Hightower, the man who would burn down the world for his family, had called the cops on his own flesh and blood. The police car pulled away, taking my heart with it. I slid down the wall until I hit the floor. I sat there in the dark, weeping. I cried for the little boy who used to run to the door when I came home from work. I cried for the young man who used to look at me with pride, before the money and the wife changed him. I felt like a murderer. I had just killed the relationship with my only child. The phone rang. The sound was jarring in the sudden silence of the house. It rang and rang. I did not want to answer it. I did not want to talk to anyone. I wanted to crawl into a hole and die. But the ringing persisted. I crawled over to where I had dropped the phone. I looked at the screen. It was Alana. I picked it up, but I could not speak. I just breathed into the receiver, my breath hitching with suppressed sobs. Virgil. Alana, his voice was soft but firm. I did it, Alana, I choked out. I sent him to jail, my own boy. I know, she said. The desk sergeant called me. I am heading down to the station now to arrange bail. I will make sure he is safe. Why, Alana? I asked, looking at the empty room illuminated by streetlights. Why does it have to be this hard? He looked at me, Alana. He looked at me like I was the devil. Because he is an addict, Virgil, she said. He is addicted to your validation and your money, and Skylar is his dealer. You cannot save an addict by giving him more of what is killing him. But jail, Alana. He has never spent a night in a cell. He is soft. He needs to see rock bottom, Alana said. Tonight was rock bottom. If you had opened that door, Skylar would have won. She would have known that no matter what she did, you would always clean up the mess, and she would have bled you dry until you were in the grave. I wiped my face with my sleeve. The image of Terrence in handcuffs was burned into my retinas. You did the right thing, Virgil, Alana continued, her voice taking on that steel tone that made her a great lawyer. It feels like hate right now, but it is love. It is the hardest kind of love there is. You are saving his life by destroying his lifestyle. Is he going to hate me forever? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Maybe, she admitted, for a while. But one day when the fog clears, he will understand. Or he won't, not. But at least you will know you did not help him dig his own grave. Go to sleep, Virgil. I have got him now. She hung up. I sat there for a long time, listening to the rain slow down to a drizzle. The storm outside was passing, but the storm inside me was just beginning. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I poured the rest of the cold coffee down the sink. I washed my hands. I scrubbed them hard as if I could wash away the image of my son in handcuffs, but the guilt stayed. I looked at the calendar on the wall. Tomorrow was the court hearing for Skylar's petition to have me declared incompetent. They wanted to prove I was weak. They wanted to prove I was senile. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. My eyes were red and puffy, but my jaw was set. I had just sent my own son to jail to save him. Let them try to call me weak tomorrow. I turned off the kitchen light and walked to my bedroom. I lay down on the bed, but I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling, praying that Alana was right. Praying that by breaking my son, I was actually making him whole again. Because if I was wrong, then I had just lost him forever. And that was a gamble that terrified me more than losing every dime I had. The desperation of a predator trapped in a corner is a dangerous thing to witness. I had taken away their land and their trucks, so I assumed Skylar would retreat. I assumed she would realize the game was over. I was wrong. She did not retreat. She decided to burn the entire forest down just to kill the bear. I later learned exactly what she did in the 48 hours after the fleet moved. She did not try to fix the logistics. She did not try to pay the drivers. Instead, she took the last remaining funds in her personal account, money she had siphoned from the company over the years, and she hired a lawyer. But she did not hire a corporate lawyer to save the business. She hired a man named Prescott. Prescott was known in Atlanta not for his brilliance, but for his brutality. He was a specialist in elder law, but he did not protect the elderly. He specialized in conservatorships. He was a hitman in a three-piece suit. Skylar sat in his office, trembling with rage, and formulated a narrative that was so twisted it made my stomach turn. She told him that I was mentally unstable. She told him that my decision to terminate the lease was not a business move, but a symptom of advanced dementia. She claimed I was paranoid, erratic, and a danger to myself and others. She painted a picture of a senile old man who had lost his grip on reality and was destroying a family legacy because of hallucinations and mood swings. She signed a sworn affidavit. In it, she detailed incidents that never happened. She claimed I forgot my own name at the party. She claimed I got lost driving to the office. She claimed I had violent outbursts against her and Terrence. It was a work of fiction, but it was dangerous fiction. Her goal was simple and terrifying. She wanted an emergency court order to declare me incapacitated. If she succeeded, the court would appoint a legal guardian to manage my affairs, and that guardian would be her husband, my son. If they won, they would not just get the land back, they would get control of every dime I had. They would have the power to put me in a home and drug me into silence. It was the ultimate betrayal. She did not just want my money, she wanted my freedom. The first I knew of this plan was not a phone call. It was a knock on my door on a Tuesday morning. It was a polite knock, firm and professional. I opened the door to find a process server standing there. He was a young man, looking uncomfortable in a cheap tie. "Mr. Virgil Hightower?" he asked, checking a photograph in his hand. "That is me," I said, holding my coffee mug. "You have been served, sir," he said, thrusting a thick envelope into my hand. He turned and walked away quickly, as if he wanted to distance himself from what he had just done. I looked down at the envelope. It was stamped with the seal of the Fulton County Probate Court. Emergency petition for temporary guardianship and conservatorship. I read the words, and my hand began to shake. Not from age, but from shock. I flipped through the pages. I saw Skylar represents signature. I saw the lies. Diagnosed with rapid onset Alzheimer's. Danger to the estate. I felt a wave of nausea. I had built a reputation over 68 years as a man of sharp mind and sharper business acumen. And now they were trying to erase that with a single legal filing. I needed to clear my head. I grabbed my keys and headed to the grocery store. I needed food. I needed normalcy. I walked the aisles of the local market, picking out apples, bread, and a carton of milk. I tried to focus on the simple act of shopping, but my mind was racing. How could Terrence agree to this? How could he sign his name next to hers? I got to the register. The cashier was a woman I had known for years named Betty. "How are you doing today, Mr. Hightower?" she asked, scanning my items. "I'm hanging in there, Betty," I said, forcing a smile. "Just a rough week." I swiped my debit card. The machine beeped. A harsh red light flashed. Transaction declined. I frowned. "That is strange," I said. "Try it again, Betty. There is plenty of money in there." She swiped it again. Beep, declined. I felt the blood drain from my face. A line was forming behind me. People were watching. "Do you have another card, Mr. Hightower?" Betty asked quietly, trying to save me from embarrassment. I pulled out my credit card, the emergency one. I inserted the chip. Declined. Contact issuer. I stared at the screen. The reality hit me like a physical punch. The emergency petition. When a petition for conservatorship is filed alleging financial recklessness, the court can issue a temporary freeze on assets to protect the estate until the hearing. They had frozen my accounts. I looked at Betty. I looked at the line of people. I looked at the milk and bread that I could not buy. "I am sorry, Betty," I whispered, my voice trembling with humiliation. I must have forgotten to transfer funds. I left the groceries on the counter. I walked out of the store, feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my life. I had millions of dollars in the bank, but I could not buy a gallon of milk. I was powerless. This was exactly what Skylar wanted. She wanted me to feel helpless. She wanted to break my spirit so that when I walked into court, I would look like the confused, broken old man she claimed I was. I sat in my truck and gripped the steering wheel. I took deep breaths. 1, 2, 3. "They want to fight," I said to the empty cab. "They want to prove I am crazy." I started the engine. I did not drive home. I drove straight to the office of Alana Hart. When I walked in, Alana looked up from her desk. She had a copy of the petition in front of her. She looked furious. "They are playing dirty, Virgil," she said, standing up. "This is the nuclear option. I know I said sitting down. They froze my money, Alana. I could not buy bread." Alana's eyes narrowed. "We will get it back. But first we have to kill this petition. We have to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are sane." She picked up her phone. "I am getting you an appointment with Dr. Evans," she said. "He is not just a doctor. He is the head of neurology at Emory University Hospital. He is the gold standard. If he says you are competent, no judge in this state will touch you." "But the hearing is tomorrow," I said. "Then we go today," Alana replied. "I am calling in a favor." 2 hours later, I was sitting in a sterile white room at the university hospital. Dr. Evans was a tall man with silver hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. He did not know me. He did not know Skylar. He had no dog in this fight. Alana had insisted on having 2 independent witnesses present during the evaluation, a notary public and a nurse practitioner. We were not taking any chances. Dr. Evans ran me through a battery of tests: the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, memory recall, logic puzzles, complex math. "Mr. Hightower," Dr. Evans said, looking at a chart, "I am going to say 5 words. I want you to repeat them to me now and then again in 5 minutes. Face, velvet, church, daisy, red. Face, velvet, church, daisy, red," I repeated instantly. He asked me to draw a clock face reading 10 past 11. I drew it with the precision of a draftsman. He asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. 100, 93, 86, 79, 72, 65. I did not hesitate. My mind felt sharper than it had in years. The anger was fueling me, giving me a clarity that burned through the exhaustion. The evaluation lasted 3 hours. At the end, Dr. Evans put down his pen. He looked at Alana, and then he looked at me. "Mr. Hightower," Dr. Evans said, removing his glasses, "I have tested 40-year-old CEOs who are not as sharp as you. Your cognitive function is in the 99th percentile for your age group. You are not only competent, you are exceptionally astute." I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. "Can you write that down?" I asked. "I will do better than that," Dr. Evans said. "I will come to court. I have seen frivolous petitions before, but this is malicious. Someone is trying to gaslight you, sir, and I do not like it when science is used as a weapon for greed." Alana smiled. It was the smile of a general who just acquired a tank. "Let them come," she said. "Let them tell the judge you are senile. We are going to walk into that courtroom, and we are going to make them look like the liars they are." I stood up and shook Dr. Evans' hand. "Thank you, doctor," I said. I walked out of the hospital into the bright afternoon sun. My bank accounts were still frozen. I still had no groceries in my fridge. My son was still trying to lock me away. But for the first time in days, I did not feel old. I felt dangerous. They wanted to prove I had lost my mind. Tomorrow, I was going to show them exactly how well my mind worked, and I was going to use it to tear their lies apart piece by piece. The courtroom smelled of lemon polish and old lies. It was a smell I knew well from my years of negotiating contracts, but today it felt heavier. It felt like a cage. I sat at the defendant table next to Alana Hart. My hands were folded on the oak surface, calm and steady. Across the aisle, Skylar was putting on the performance of a lifetime. She was wearing a modest black dress that she must have bought just for this occasion, because I had never seen her wear anything that did not scream, "Look at me." She had no makeup on, which was a calculated move to show her distress. She sat in the witness box, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, while her lawyer, a man with a smile like a used car salesman, guided her through the script. "It is just so hard, Your Honor," Skylar said, her voice trembling perfectly. "We love Virgil. We love him so much, but the decline has been rapid. He forgets where he is. He wanders out into the street at night. Last week, he called my husband by his dead brother's name. He is a danger to himself." I watched her lie. I watched the way she looked at the judge with wide, pleading eyes. She was painting a picture of a senile, helpless old man who needed to be locked away for his own safety, and the media was eating it up. Skylar had tipped off the press. In the back of the courtroom, I could hear the scratching of pens and the soft clicks of cameras. The headline was already written: "The tragic fall of a local tycoon. The dutiful son and daughter-in-law stepping in to save him." Her lawyer, Mr. Prescott, leaned in. "And tell the court, Mrs. Hightower, why you filed this emergency petition." Skylar sniffed loudly. "Because he is burning through his life savings. He is making irrational business decisions. He terminated the lease on our company headquarters for no reason. He put hundreds of people out of work because of a delusion. We just want to protect what is left of his legacy. We want to make sure he is comfortable in his final years." She looked at me then. It was a look of pure pity, but behind it, I saw the glint of triumph. She thought she had won. She thought that by dragging me into this courtroom, she had already humiliated me enough to break my spirit. Terrence sat behind her. He was looking at his shoes. He could not look at me. He knew the truth. He knew I was sharper than he would ever be. But he was too weak to stop the train his wife was driving. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Vance, looked over her glasses at Skylar. "Thank you, Mrs. Hightower. You may step down." Skylar walked back to her seat, clutching her tissue like a lifeline. She squeezed Terrence's hand and he flinched. "Mr. Hightower," the judge said, looking at me, "your counsel has indicated you wish to speak." I stood up. I did not push myself up with my hands. I did not wobble. I stood up with the same strength I used to lift crates off the loading dock. I buttoned my suit jacket. It was the charcoal gray one, the lucky one. I walked to the witness stand. My steps were measured and firm. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth. "Mr. Hightower," Alana said, standing up. She did not need to guide me. She just opened the door. "Can you tell the court your name and date of birth?" "Virgil James Hightower, born August 12, 1956. "And can you tell the court why we are here today?" "We are here because my daughter-in-law would rather declare me insane than admit she stole from my company," I said. Objection, Mr. Prescott shouted, jumping up. Speculation. Overruled, Judge Vance said. Her eyes were fixed on me. Continue, Mr. Hightower. I turned to the judge. I did not shout. I did not get angry. I spoke with the cadence of a man who knows his facts. Your Honor, the plaintiff claims I have Alzheimer's. She claims I have lost my memory. So let me test my memory right now. I founded Hightower Logistics on October 4th, 1984. The price of diesel that day was $1.15 a gallon. My first truck was a Mack R600 with a transmission that stuck in third gear. I paused, scanning the room. On the day I handed the CEO position to my son 2 years ago, the company had $4 million in cash reserves and zero debt. Today, as of 9 a.m. this morning, the company has $200 in the operating account and $3 million in short-term high-interest debt. Skylar shifted in her seat. She whispered something to her lawyer. I continued, my voice growing stronger. They claim I terminated the lease because of a delusion. I terminated the lease because on the night of the company anniversary gala, my daughter-in-law purchased a handbag for $12,000 using the corporate credit card, while my drivers were driving on half pay. I terminated the lease because that is the only leverage I had to stop the bleeding. Mr. Prescott stood up again. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. The question is his mental capacity, not his business decisions. It is entirely relevant, the judge snapped. Sit down, counsel. I looked at Terrence. He finally looked up. His face was pale. I remember everything, son, I said directly to him. I remember the day you were born. It was raining. I remember the day you graduated. You wore a blue tie. And I remember the look on your face when you watched the police put me in the back of a squad car 2 nights ago. You did not look sad, Terrence. You looked relieved. Because you thought, if I was locked away, you would never have to pay back the money you let your wife steal. The courtroom was dead silent. The reporters in the back had stopped writing. They were leaning forward. The narrative was shifting. The senile old man was gone. In his place stood a titan. I turned back to Skylar. I do not have dementia, Skylar. I have a moral compass, and that is something you have never been able to understand. I stepped down from the stand. I walked back to my seat. I could feel the energy in the room change. The judge was looking at Skylar with suspicion. But suspicion was not enough. We needed a kill shot. Alana Hart stood up. She picked up a thin file folder. It was not thick like the fake petition Skylar had filed. It contained only 2 pieces of paper. But they were the heaviest pieces of paper in the world. Your Honor, Alana said, her voice cutting through the silence like a razor blade. The plaintiff has submitted a medical affidavit from a Dr. Eris Thorne, claiming he examined Mr. Hightower and diagnosed him with advanced cognitive decline. That is correct, Mr. Prescott said, sounding nervous. Dr. Thorne is a respected expert. Is he? Alana asked. Because we did some digging. She walked to the bench and handed the file to the judge. Exhibit A is a sworn statement from the staff at Dr. Thorne's private clinic. It states that Mr. Virgil Hightower has never been a patient at that facility. He has never walked through the doors. He has never been examined by Dr. Thorne. Skylar gasped. It was a loud, involuntary sound. She grabbed Terrence's arm, digging her nails into his suit jacket. And Exhibit B, Alana continued turning to look directly at Skylar. This is a bank record obtained through a subpoena this morning. It shows a wire transfer of $5,000 from the personal account of Skylar Hightower to Dr. Eris Thorne. The memo line says consulting fee, but the date of the transfer is the day before the medical affidavit was signed. The courtroom erupted. Reporters were on their feet. Skylar's lawyer dropped his pen. Terrence looked like he was going to vomit. Order! Judge Vance banged her gavel so hard it sounded like a gunshot. Order in this court. She looked at the documents. Her face turned a shade of red that promised violence. She looked up at Skylar. The look of suspicion was gone, replaced by the cold fury of the law. Mrs. Hightower, the judge, said, her voice low and dangerous. Did you pay a doctor to falsify a medical diagnosis for your father-in-law? Skylar stood up. He is sick. We needed the paper. Sit down, the judge barked. Judge Vance turned to the bailiff. Lock the doors. Nobody leaves this room. She looked at Mr. Prescott. Counsel, you are dangerously close to being disbarred. I suggest you stop talking. Then she looked at me. Mr. Hightower, the court apologizes to you. This petition is dismissed with prejudice, immediately. But she was not done. Bailiff, take Mrs. Schuyler Hightower into custody. I am holding her in contempt of court, and I am referring this file to the district attorney's office. This is not a civil matter anymore. This is fraud. This is perjury. And this is a conspiracy to deprive a citizen of his civil rights. Schuyler screamed. No, you cannot. Terrence, do something. Two officers moved toward the plaintiff's table. Schuyler backed away, knocking over her chair. Terrence, she shrieked. Tell them we did it for the family. Terrence sat frozen. He looked at his wife being grabbed by the officers. He looked at the handcuffs coming out, the same handcuffs they had put on him 2 nights ago. He looked at me. I did not look away. I did not smile. I just watched. Schuyler was dragged out of the courtroom, screaming curses at me, at the judge, at her husband. The reporters were flashing pictures like strobe lights. When the doors closed behind her, the silence returned. Judge Vance looked at Terrence. Mr. Hightower, do you have anything to say before I decide if you should join your wife? Terrence stood up slowly. He looked broken. He looked like a man who had woken up from a long dream to find his house on fire. No, Your Honor, he whispered. I have nothing. The judge looked at him with disgust. You are lucky your father is a better man than you are. Get out of my courtroom. I stood up and shook Alana's hand. Her grip was warm and strong. We got them, Virgil, she said softly. We got the truth, Alana, I replied. I walked out of the courtroom. The cameras flashed in my face, but I did not stop. I walked past Terrence, who was slumped on a bench in the hallway, his head in his hands. I did not stop to comfort him. Not yet. He had to sit in the wreckage a little longer. He had to understand that when you try to bury a seed, you do not kill it. You just make it grow into something stronger. And today, the roots of the Hightower family had just broken through the concrete. The fall of Rome took centuries, but the fall of Hightower Logistics took exactly 5 days. It was a spectacle that the local business journals called a masterclass in mismanagement. But I knew it was simply gravity doing its job. When you cut the roots of a tree, it does not matter how tall it stands or how green its leaves look. It is already dead. It just takes a few days for the leaves to turn brown. On Monday morning, the bankruptcy court appointed a trustee to liquidate the assets of the company. Since there was no land and no operating license, the company was worthless. The bank, which had been so eager to lend Terrence millions for his expansion, suddenly became a pack of wolves. They triggered the default clauses in every loan agreement. They did not care about Terrence's dreams or Schuyler's vision. They only cared about their money. I parked my truck down the street from the mansion Terrence had bought 3 years ago. It was a monstrosity of a house with 6 bedrooms for 2 people and marble columns that looked ridiculous in a Georgia suburb. I watched as the inevitable conclusion of their greed arrived in the form of a convoy of white vans. First came the repo men. They were efficient and emotionless. I watched them load the Porsche onto a flatbed truck. Terrence loved that car more than he loved himself. He used to wash it every Sunday right in the driveway so the neighbors could see him. Now it was being dragged away, covered in dust, its alarm chirping pathetically like a dying bird. Next, they took Schuyler's Range Rover. Then came the bank officials. They walked up the driveway with clipboards and a padlock. They were there to seize the property. The house was collateral for the business loans that Schuyler had insisted on. I saw Terrence standing in the driveway. He was wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants, looking nothing like the CEO who had sneered at me a week ago. He was arguing with a man in a cheap suit. I could not hear the words, but I knew the body language. The man was shaking his head. He pointed to the document in his hand. He pointed to the front door. Terrence crumbled. He slumped his shoulders and stepped aside. He watched as the man taped a bright orange notice to the front door. Foreclosure. Eviction notice. It was a scarlet letter for the entire neighborhood to see. Mrs. Jenkins was walking her dog across the street, and she stopped to stare. The neighbors who Terrence had tried so hard to impress were now peeking through their blinds, witnessing his absolute humiliation. I did not feel joy watching this. A father never rejoices in his son's pain, but I felt a grim satisfaction that the universe was finally balancing the scales. Terrence had lived a lie for too long. He thought he was a giant because he was standing on my shoulders. Now that I had stepped away, He was realizing he was just a man standing in a hole. The bank gave them 24 hours to remove their personal belongings. 24 hours to pack up a life that was built on credit and arrogance. I watched Terrence sit on the curb, his head in his hands, while the repo truck drove away with his identity. He looked small. He looked like a lost child waiting for his parents to pick him up from school. But nobody was coming to pick him up this time. Inside the house, the atmosphere was not one of shared sorrow. It was a war zone. Skylar did not handle failure well. She did not know how to be poor. She did not know how to struggle. To her, a setback was not a challenge. It was an insult. I learned later from the housekeeper who was let go that afternoon exactly what happened inside those marble walls. Skylar went into a frenzy. She did not help Terrence pack the kitchen or the books. She ran to the master closet. She pulled out 4 massive Louis Vuitton suitcases and began stuffing them with everything of value she could carry. She packed the designer dresses. She packed the jewelry. She packed the shoes that cost more than a month of rent. She moved with the desperate energy of a looter stripping a burning building. Terrence walked into the bedroom. He was holding a box of family photos, the only thing he had thought to save. "Skylar, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice hollow. "We need to pack the dishes. We need to figure out where we are going to sleep tonight." Skylar did not look at him. She zipped up a suitcase with a vicious yank. "We," she laughed, a harsh sound that bounced off the empty walls. "There is no we, Terrence. I am going to the Four Seasons. I booked a room with the last functioning credit card I have." Terrence dropped the box of photos. The glass frame of his graduation picture shattered. "You are leaving me," he whispered. "Now, when I have nothing." Skylar turned to him. Her eyes were cold, dead things. There was no love in them. There never had been. There was only calculation. And now that the math did not add up, she was closing the ledger. "Look at you," she spat. "You are a loser, Terrence. You are a bankrupt, unemployed loser, with a criminal record pending for fraud. Do you really think I signed up for this? I signed up for the CEO. I signed up for the Hightower fortune. I did not sign up to live in a motel and clip coupons with you. But I did this for you," Terrence cried, tears streaming down his face. "I fought my dad for you. I tried to steal the land for you. I went to jail for you, Skylar. And you failed," she screamed, throwing a hanger at him. "You failed at everything. You could not even stand up to one old man. You let him outsmart you. You let him humiliate us in court. You are weak, Terrence, and I do not do weak." She grabbed the handles of her suitcases. She struggled to drag them toward the door. She was leaving him with nothing but the clothes on his back and the debt she had helped create. Terrence blocked the doorway. He grabbed her arm. "Skylar, please. We are married, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer." Skylar ripped her arm away. She looked at him with pure disgust. "Read the prenup, honey," she said. "It says I get to leave if you become insolvent. And darling, you are worse than insolvent. You are radioactive." She reached for her left hand. She twisted the massive diamond ring off her finger. It was a ring I had paid for 3 years ago because Terrence said she deserved the best. It was a 5-carat diamond that represented my sweat and my sacrifice. She threw the ring at him. It hit him in the chest and bounced onto the hardwood floor, spinning noisily before coming to a rest. "Sell that," she said. "It might buy you a month in a trailer park. That is where you belong." She pushed past him, dragging her loot down the grand staircase. She did not look back. She walked out the front door, past the foreclosure sign, and called an Uber. She stood on the curb waiting for a stranger to take her away from the wreckage she had caused, leaving her husband standing alone in the ruins. Terrence did not chase her this time. He did not run after her begging. He just stood there in the master bedroom, staring at the ring on the floor. The silence in the house must have been deafening. For the first time in his life, Terrence was truly alone. The movers had left. The staff had left. His wife had left. The electricity was still on, but the house felt dark. He slid down the wall until he hit the floor. He sat there, with his legs splayed out in front of him, staring at the empty shelves where Skylar's shoes used to be. He picked up the ring. He turned it over in his fingers. It was cold and hard, just like the woman who wore it. He realized then the magnitude of his mistake. He had traded a diamond for a stone. He had traded a father who would have died for him, for a woman who would not even stay for him when the money ran out. He looked around the room. This house was supposed to be his palace. It was supposed to be the symbol of his success. Now it was just a pile of bricks owned by a bank. He thought about me. He thought about the small wooden house with the creaky porch. He thought about the smell of coffee and the sound of my laughter. He realized that my house was small, but it was full. His house was huge, but it was empty. He had called me a charity case. He had called me a burden. Now, sitting on the floor of a foreclosed mansion, he realized the truth. He was the charity case. He was the one who was spiritually bankrupt. He pulled his knees to his chest and buried his face in his arms. He did not cry the angry tears of a child this time. He cried the deep, silent tears of a man who knows he has broken something that cannot be fixed. I sat in my truck down the street, watching the Uber pull away with Skylar inside. I watched the lights in the mansion go out, one by one, as the sun set. I wanted to go to him. I wanted to drive up that driveway and kick down the door and hold him. But Alana's words rang in my head. He needs to feel the bottom. So I put my truck in gear and drove away. I left my son sitting in the dark because it was the only way he would ever learn to find the light. The fall from the penthouse to the pavement is a long drop, but the landing is what truly breaks you. It had been 30 days since the bank seized the mansion, and 30 days since Skylar drove away in an Uber, leaving my son with nothing but the clothes on his back. 30 days is not a long time in the grand scheme of a life. But when you are sleeping on a lumpy mattress in a motel where the police sirens serve as a lullaby, 30 days feels like 30 years. I did not intervene. I did not swoop in with a checkbook to save him from the consequences of his own arrogance. I watched from a distance. I hired a private investigator not to spy on him, but to make sure he was still alive. I received daily reports. They were painful to read. Terrence was living in a weekly rental motel on the south side of town. The kind of place where they charge by the hour, and the sheets are never quite white. He had sold his expensive watches to pay for the first 2 weeks. When that money ran out, he realized that a degree in business management does not mean much when your name is mud in the corporate world. Nobody would hire him. His name was attached to a bankruptcy and a fraud investigation. So he did what men have done for generations when they have no other choice. He used his back. My son, the former CEO, who used to complain if his office chair was not ergonomic enough, was now working off the books for a moving company. He was waking up at 5 in the morning to stand on a corner waiting to be picked up for day labor. He was lifting heavy furniture up narrow staircases for $10 an hour, cash. The investigator sent me a photo. In it, Terrence was sitting on a curb, eating a cold sandwich during a break. His designer jeans were stained with grease. His hands, the hands that used to get manicures alongside his wife, were wrapped in cheap bandages. He looked exhausted. He looked defeated. But for the first time in his life, he looked real. He was finally learning the lesson I had tried to teach him for decades. He was learning that respect is not something you buy. It is something you bleed for. He was also learning what it felt like to be looked down upon. The report said that a homeowner had yelled at him for tracking mud onto a carpet. Terrence had apologized with his head down. He had been treated like the help. He had been treated like a nuisance. He was tasting the same bitterness he had served to me at that anniversary party. He was realizing that when you strip away the suit and the bank account, you are just a man. And if you do not have character, you are less than a man. I decided it was time. I did not want to break him completely. I just wanted to crack the shell so the light could get in. I sent him a text message. It was simple. Meet me at Big Mama Barbecue at 7. Do not be late. I arrived at the restaurant 15 minutes early. Big Mama was a staple in our community. It was a place with checkered tablecloths and the smell of hickory smoke that had soaked into the walls over 50 years. It was loud. It was crowded. It was cheap. It was exactly the kind of place Terrence used to refuse to enter because he said it smelled like poverty. I sat in a booth in the back. At 7 o'clock sharp, the door opened. Terrence walked in. I almost did not recognize him. He had lost weight. His face was gaunt and covered in a patchy beard. He was wearing a faded work shirt and boots that were falling apart. He looked around nervously, expecting people to judge him. But nobody judged him here. In this place, a working man was a king. He saw me and walked over. He did not swagger. He shuffled. He slid into the booth opposite me and kept his eyes on the table. "Hello, Dad," he whispered. His voice was raspy. "Hello, son," I said. I did not hug him. I did not smile. I just pushed a menu toward him. "Order whatever you want." He looked at the menu. I saw his throat bob as he swallowed. He was hungry. Not the polite hunger of a man waiting for a dinner reservation, but the primal hunger of a man who had not eaten a full meal in days. The waitress came over, a kind woman named Betsy, who had been serving me ribs since the 80s. "What can I get you two handsome men?" she asked. "I will have the usual, Betsy," I said, "and bring the boy the full rack. With sides. All the sides." Terrence looked up at me. His eyes were watery. "Thank you," he mouthed. When the food arrived, Terrence did not wait for a prayer. He attacked the plate. He picked up a rib with his bare hands and tore into the meat. Sauce dripped onto his chin, and he did not even wipe it away. He ate with a desperation that broke my heart. This was my boy. This was the child I had promised to protect. Seeing him this hungry made me want to cry, but I held it in. I sipped my iced tea and watched him eat. I remembered how he used to dine at five-star steakhouses. I remembered how he would send a bottle of wine back if the vintage was not correct. I remembered how he would snap his fingers at waiters. Now he was eating cornbread like it was gold. He finished the entire rack of ribs in 10 minutes. He wiped his mouth with a paper napkin and sat back, letting out a long sigh. The color was returning to his cheeks. "Is the ribs good?" I asked, my voice neutral. Terrence looked at me. He nodded slowly. "They are the best thing I have ever tasted, Dad." I nodded. "Hunger is the best seasoning, son. When you earn your hunger, the food tastes better. When you sit at a table you did not pay, for the food turns to ash in your mouth. You know that now, do not you?" Terrence lowered his head. "I know," he said softly. "I know I was arrogant. I know I was ungrateful. I thought I was better than this place. I thought I was better than you. And now I asked. Now I am just a guy who moves boxes for cash," he said, bitter tears filling his eyes. "I am a nobody, Dad. I lost the company. I lost my wife. I lost your respect. I am nothing. You are not nothing," I said, leaning forward. "You are stripped down. There is a difference. When you strip a car down to the chassis, you can see where the rust is. You can see what is broken, and you can fix it. You could not fix yourself when you were covered in layers of expensive lies. Now you can." Terrence looked at his hands. They were scarred and rough. "Skylar called me a loser," he whispered. "Before she left, she threw her ring at me and said I was a charity case. I felt a flash of anger at Skylar, but I let it pass. She was gone. She was in a jail cell awaiting trial for fraud. She was the past." "She was right," I said. Terrence looked up, shocked. "She was right because you were living on charity," I continued. "My charity. You were driving a car I bought, living in a house the company paid for, and eating food provided by my hard work. You were a charity case, Terrence. You just wore a tuxedo while you begged." The truth hit him hard. He flinched. "But that ends today," I said. I reached into my pocket. I did not pull out a checkbook. I did not pull out a wad of cash. I pulled out a single piece of paper folded in half. I slid it across the sticky table. Terrence picked it up. His hands were shaking. He unfolded it. It was an employment application. At the top it said, "Etta Transport." It was the name of my new company. The logo was simple, just like his mother would have wanted. "What is this?" Terrence asked. "It is a job offer," I said. "But do not get excited. It is not for vice president. It is not for manager. It is not even for dispatcher." I pointed to the line at the bottom. Position, trainee driver. Starting pay, $15 an hour. Terrence looked at the wage. It was less than what he used to spend on lunch. "You want me to drive a truck?" he asked. "No," I said. "I want you to learn how to drive a truck. You will start at 4 in the morning. You will wash the rigs. You will check the tire pressure. You will load the cargo. And if you show up on time every day for 6 months, I might let you get behind the wheel. But I am your son," he said, a hint of his old pride surfacing. "That is why the pay is so low," I said, cutting him off. "If you were a stranger, I would start you at 18. But you have a debt to pay, Terrence. You have a debt to the universe. You need to learn what it feels like to sweat for $1. You need to understand that the men you stiffed on payroll are the ones who carry this country on their backs." I stood up. I put a $20 bill on the table to cover the meal. "There is no nepotism at Etta Transport," I said, looking down at him. "You will answer to the yard foreman. If you are late, you get fired. If you complain, you get fired. If you act like you are better than anyone else, you get fired." I turned to leave. Dad, Terrence called out. I stopped, but I did not turn around. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice trembling. Why give me a chance at all after what I did? Because charity cases eat last, I said, quoting the words that had started this whole war. But working men eat first. The choice is yours, Terrence. You can go back to that motel and feel sorry for yourself, or you can show up at the yard at 4 a.m. and become a man. I walked out of the restaurant into the humid Georgia night. I did not look back to see if he took the paper. I could not force him to walk through the door. I could only show him where it was. I got into my truck and drove away, leaving my son to decide if he wanted to be a victim of his past or the architect of his future. While Terrence was learning the hard lesson of hunger, his wife was planning her grand exit. Skylar was not the type of woman to sink with the ship. She was the type who would steal the only lifeboat and paddle away while watching everyone else drown. She had spent the last 48 hours in a suite at the Four Seasons, burning through the final limits of credit cards that had not yet been frozen. She was not grieving her marriage. She was not worrying about her husband sleeping on a floor. She was calculating. I later learned from the FBI report exactly how she spent those final hours of freedom. She sat by the window, overlooking the city she thought she owned, and made phone calls to a private banker in the Cayman Islands. Skylar had been siphoning money for 3 years. Every time she overcharged the company for a gala or a renovation, she skimmed 10% off the top. She called it her rainy day fund. Well, it was storming now, and she was ready to cash out. She had booked a one-way ticket to Paris on Air France, first class, of course. She probably imagined herself starting a new life in Europe, perhaps finding some French aristocrat to charm, just as she had charmed my son. She packed her Louis Vuitton bags with only the most expensive items, the jewelry, the cash she had withdrawn, the hard drives containing client lists she planned to sell to competitors. She looked at herself in the mirror one last time. She did not see a criminal. She saw a survivor. She told herself that she deserved this money. She told herself that she had put up with a boring husband and a stubborn father-in-law for years, and this was her severance package. She put on large sunglasses and a silk scarf, trying to look like a movie star, avoiding the paparazzi. She called a black car service. She walked out of the hotel with her head held high, ignoring the doorman who she had tipped poorly the day before. She did not look back at Atlanta. To her, this city was just a carcass she had picked clean. She sat in the back of the luxury sedan, checking her flight status. On time. She smiled. She thought she was home free. She thought that because she was smart and pretty and ruthless, the rules did not apply to her. She thought that Virgil Hightower was just an old man crying in his garden. She forgot that I had Alana Hart, and she forgot that forensic accountants can track a digital footprint faster than a plane can fly across the Atlantic. The drive to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport must have felt like a victory lap for her. She probably sipped sparkling water and dreamed of croissants and couture. She arrived at the international terminal and breezed through the check-in counter. She had TSA pre-check, so she did not even have to take off her shoes. She walked toward the security checkpoint, her heart beating with the thrill of the escape. She was 10 minutes away from the safety of the International Departure Lounge. 10 minutes away from a glass of champagne and a flight to freedom. But freedom is not free, Skylar, and you had not paid your bill. I was not there, but Alana told me everything. She had been working with the FBI for 3 days. We had handed over every invoice, every falsified receipt, and every wire transfer record. We showed them how she had structured the payments to avoid IRS detection. We showed them the shell companies she created under her maiden name. It was not just theft, it was federal wire fraud and tax evasion. It was the kind of crime that makes the government very angry. Skylar stepped up to the document checker. She handed over her passport and her boarding pass. The agent scanned it. A red light beeped on the console. Skylar frowned. "Is there a problem?" she asked, tapping her foot. "I am in a hurry." The agent did not smile. "Please wait here, ma'am," he said. Suddenly the crowd parted. 4 agents in windbreakers with those 3 terrifying letters printed on the back stepped forward. FBI. They did not look like the polite police officers who had arrested Terrence. These men looked like sharks. Skylar Hightower, the lead agent, said, his voice booming over the noise of the terminal. Skylar froze. She lowered her sunglasses. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Who are you?" "I am Special Agent Miller. You are under arrest for 18 counts of wire fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering." Skylar laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. "This is a mistake. I am Skylar Hightower. My husband is the CEO of Hightower Logistics. Call him. This is ridiculous." "Your husband is bankrupt, ma'am," Agent Miller said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "And we have a warrant signed by a federal judge. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." People were watching. Travelers were pulling out their phones. The very public humiliation she had inflicted on me was now coming back to her tenfold. "No," Skylar screamed, backing away. "You cannot touch me. I have rights. That money is mine. I earned it." She tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt. She made it 2 steps before they grabbed her. They spun her around. The click of the handcuffs was loud and final. They were not the gold bracelets she liked to wear. They were cold, heavy steel. "My bag," Skylar shrieked as they led her away. "My bag has my jewelry. Be careful with it. It is evidence now, ma'am," the agent said. They walked her through the terminal, past the duty-free shops and the food court. Everyone saw her. The Princess of Atlanta was being dragged away like a common thief. She was crying now, screaming curses, blaming everyone but herself. She blamed Terrence. She blamed the bank. And mostly she screamed my name. "Virgil Hightower did this," she yelled. "That old man set me up." She was right about one thing. I did set the table. But she was the one who decided to eat the poison. 3 days later, I went to see her. The Fulton County Jail is a grim place. It smells of bleach and despair. It is a place that strips away your dignity the moment the heavy steel doors slam shut behind you. I sat in the visitation room on a metal stool bolted to the floor. There was a thick pane of glass separating the free world from the caged one. They brought Skylar in. I barely recognized her. The silk dress was gone, replaced by a shapeless orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her frame. Her hair, which was usually perfectly blown out, was greasy and pulled back into a messy knot. Her roots were showing. Without her makeup, her face looked pale and sharp. Her eyes were rimmed with red circles. She looked like a ghost of the woman who had stood in the ballroom and laughed at me. She sat down and picked up the phone receiver. She did not say hello. She glared at me with a hatred so pure it felt like heat radiating through the glass. "Are you happy?" she hissed. "Are you happy now, you old bastard? You ruined my life." I picked up the phone calmly. I did not raise my voice. "You ruined your own life, Skylar," I said. "I just turned on the lights so everyone could see what you were doing in the dark." She slammed her hand against the glass. The guard behind her took a step forward, but she ignored him. "I was going to be someone," she screamed. "I had a plan. I was going to turn that dusty old trucking company into a global brand. I was going to make us billions. And you were too stupid to see it. You and your pathetic son. Terrence is a weakling. I carried him. I carried both of you. You stole from us, Skylar," I said. "You stole from the drivers. You stole from the pension fund. You bought shoes with money that was supposed to pay for insulin for my workers. That is not business. That is being a parasite. I deserve that money," she spat. "I put up with your boring stories. I put up with Terrence's incompetence. I earned every penny, and now look at me. I am in a cage with animals. The food is slop. The bed is concrete. Get me out, Virgil. You have money. Pay the bail. Get me the best lawyer. If you do not, I will tell the press everything. I will lie. I will say you touched me. I will say you abused me. I will destroy your reputation." I looked at her. I looked deep into her eyes, and I saw nothing but a black hole of narcissism. She truly believed she was the victim. She had no remorse, no conscience. She was willing to destroy anyone to save herself. "Go ahead, Skylar," I said. "Tell them whatever you want. We have the receipts. We have the emails. We have the offshore accounts. The truth has a way of coming out. And right now, the truth is wearing an orange jumpsuit." She started to cry then. But it was not sad crying. It was angry, frustrated crying. "Why are you doing this?" she wailed. "We were family." "No, Skylar," I said, leaning closer to the glass. "We were never family. To you, I was just a bank account. And Terrence was just a ladder. You climbed us, and when you got to the top, you tried to kick the ladder down. I stood up. I was done. I had seen enough." "Wait," she screamed. "Do not leave me here. Virgil, please. I am scared. They are going to send me to federal prison. 10 years, Virgil. I cannot do 10 years. I am too pretty for prison." I paused. I looked at her one last time. "You made a mistake, Skylar," I said, my voice low and steady. You looked at my gray hair and my dirty fingernails, and you thought I was stupid. You thought I was just an old mechanic who got lucky. I placed my hand on the glass over where her face was. But you forgot what a mechanic does, I said. We build things. We take raw metal and grease, and we build engines that can pull mountains. But because we know how to build them, we also know exactly how to take them apart. Bolt by bolt, screw by screw. I built this empire, Skylar, and I knew exactly which bolt to pull to bring it down on top of you. I hung up the phone. Virgil, she screamed, her voice muffled by the glass. Come back, you cannot leave me. I turned my back on her. I walked toward the heavy steel door. Behind me, I could see her pounding on the glass, screaming silently like a fish in a bowl. I walked out of the jail into the bright sunshine. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like justice. Skylar was where she belonged. And now that the cancer was cut out, it was time to focus on the patient. It was time to go back to Terrence and see if anything could be saved from the wreckage. 6 months is not a long time in the history of the world, but in the life of a business, it is an eternity. After the collapse of Hightower Logistics, the dust settled quickly. The vultures picked the carcass clean. The bank sold the glass building to a tech startup. The luxury cars were auctioned off to pay creditors. The name Hightower, which once commanded fear and respect in Atlanta, had become a punchline in the local business columns. But while the city was busy laughing at the fall, I was busy pouring concrete for the new foundation. I did not want to rebuild the old company. The old company was a monument to ego. It was built on leverage and expansion and the hollow pursuit of quarterly profits. I wanted to build something that felt like home. I bought back a fleet of trucks at auction using my own savings. I did not buy the shiny new Volvos that Skylar liked because they looked good on Instagram. I bought Peterbilts, strong, reliable American iron that could run for 1,000,000 miles if you treated them right. I named the new company Etta Transport. When the sign went up over the gate at the south lot, I stood there for an hour just looking at it. It was not neon. It was hand-painted on wood, just like the first sign Etta and I made in 1984. Her name looked good up there. It was a reminder that this company was not about me, and it was certainly not about buying designer handbags. It was about service. The culture at Etta Transport was different from day one. There were no glass walls. There were no executive suites. My office was a converted shipping container with a window that looked out onto the yard. The door was always open. But the biggest change was the break room. At the old company, the drivers were not allowed in the main building. They had to use a portable toilet outside. At Etta Transport, the break room was the heart of the facility. It had leather recliners, a full kitchen, and the best coffee money could buy. I hired back Big Mike and every single driver who had walked off the job for me. They came back not because I offered the highest pay, but because I offered them dignity. I told them that at Etta Transport, the driver is the CEO of his own truck. When they saw the name on the sign, some of those hard men wiped tears from their eyes. They remembered Etta. They remembered her Christmas cookies and how she knew the names of all their children. We did not have a grand opening gala. There was no champagne. There were no speeches. On the first Monday of operations, I just walked into the dispatch room, poured a cup of coffee, and said, "Let's get to work." The roar of 50 diesel engines starting up at once was the only music I needed. It was the sound of a giant waking up from a coma, not angry anymore, but focused. We were smaller now. We were leaner. But we were stronger, because this time we were building on rock instead of sand. And at the bottom of this new hierarchy, at the very bottom of the ladder, was a trainee named Terrence. My son showed up on his first day at 3:45 in the morning. He was 15 minutes early. He parked his beat-up used sedan in the employee lot, far away from the trucks. He walked toward the maintenance bay, wearing a pair of stiff new coveralls that looked ridiculous on him. He looked like a child wearing a costume. He was nervous. I could see his hands shaking as he punched his time card. I had given strict instructions to the yard foreman, a man named Silas. Silas was an ex-Marine who chewed tobacco and did not care about anyone's last name. I told Silas to treat Terrence exactly like he would treat any other greenhorn who had never worked a day in his life. Silas did not disappoint. He met Terrence at the bay door, holding a bucket and a scrub brush. "You are late, college boy," Silas barked, even though Terrence was early. "I am early, sir," Terrence stammered. "You are late because I have been here since 3. Silas said, spitting on the concrete. "Grab that brush. Truck number 4 came in last night through a mudslide in Alabama. I want it clean enough to eat off of by sunrise. And do not miss the wheel wells." I watched from my office window as my son, the former CEO, took the bucket. The water was cold. The morning air was freezing. Terrence dipped his hands into the soapy water and started scrubbing the massive tires of the 18-wheeler. He was slow at first. He was clumsy. He scrubbed with his shoulders instead of his back. After 20 minutes, his arms were trembling. He stopped to wipe sweat from his forehead, leaving a streak of black grease across his face. Silas walked by and kicked the tire. "My grandmother scrubs harder than that," Silas yelled. "Put some back into it, Hightower. That mud is not going to ask you for a loan. It is not going to move unless you make it move." Terrence flinched. I saw his jaw tighten. In the old days, he would have fired Silas on the spot. He would have screamed, "Do you know who I am?" But he did not say a word. He grit his teeth, dipped the brush back into the freezing water, and scrubbed harder. For the next 6 months, this was his life. He was not allowed to drive. He was a yard dog. He washed trucks. He swept the warehouse floor. He loaded heavy cargo onto pallets until his fingers bled. He learned the smell of diesel and the weight of a ratchet strap. He learned that if you do not secure a load properly, it can kill a man. He came home every night to a small studio apartment he rented with his own money. He was too tired to go out. He was too tired to feel sorry for himself. He fell asleep with grease under his fingernails and woke up before the sun to do it all over again. One afternoon in July, the heat on the asphalt was over 100 degrees. Terrence was helping unload a shipment of lumber. It was back-breaking work. He was paired with a driver named Old Man Jenkins, who was 70 years old and tough as leather. Terrence dropped a plank. It clattered to the ground. "Careful, boy," Jenkins snapped. "That is high-grade oak. You damage it, you bought it. And I know you cannot afford it." "I am sorry," Terrence gasped, wiping sweat from his eyes. "I am just tired." "Tired?" Jenkins laughed. "You do not know tired. Tired is driving 11 hours through a snowstorm to get home to a sick kid. Tired is missing your anniversary because the load had to get there. You are not tired, son. You were just soft." Terrence stopped. He looked at Jenkins. He looked at the other drivers who were watching. They were waiting for him to quit. They were betting on when the rich kid would break. Terrence picked up the plank. He hoisted it onto his shoulder. "I am not soft," he said quietly. "Then prove it," Jenkins said. Terrence worked for 4 hours straight without a break. He moved more lumber than men half his age. When the truck was finally empty, he collapsed onto a stack of pallets, his shirt soaked through completely. Jenkins walked over to him. He handed him a cold bottle of water. "Not bad," Jenkins grunted. "Not bad at all." It was the first compliment Terrence had received in 6 months. I saw him smile. It was not the fake, camera-ready smile he used to have. It was a small, exhausted, genuine smile. He drank the water like it was nectar. He had earned that water, and for the first time, he understood the value of it. Friday came and it was payday. In the old days, Terrence's paycheck was a direct deposit of figures he never bothered to count. Now, he had to line up at the window like everyone else. He stood in line behind the drivers. When he got to the window, the payroll clerk handed him a paper check. It was for $600 after taxes. Terrence held the check. He stared at it. $600. He used to spend that on a bottle of wine at lunch, but he did not look disappointed. He looked at the check with a strange reverence. He folded it carefully and put it in his shirt pocket, patting it to make sure it was safe. That money represented 60 hours of sweat. It represented blisters and back spasms and getting yelled at by Silas. It was the first honest money he had ever made. I was watching him. I was always watching him. I had installed a camera feed in my office that overlooked the main yard. I told myself it was for security, but in truth it was because I needed to see my son. I needed to see if the fire was forging him or turning him to ash. I watched him walk to his old car after his shift. He did not look at his phone. He walked with a slight limp because his boots were cheap and his feet were sore, but his head was up. He stopped by the gate. There was a piece of trash on the ground, a plastic wrapper someone had dropped. In the past, Terrence would have stepped over it. He would have assumed it was someone else represent's job to pick it up. He would have been offended that the world was not pristine for him. But today, he stopped. He bent down and picked up the wrapper. He walked 20 feet out of his way to put it in the trash can. It was a small thing, a tiny, insignificant gesture. But to me, it was everything. It meant he cared. It meant he took ownership. It meant he finally understood that this company, this land, this name, was not a resource to be exploited, but a responsibility to be protected. I stood by the window in my darkened office. My hand rested on the glass. I looked down at him as he got into his car. He looked tired. He looked older than his years, but he looked like a man. I nodded slowly to the empty room. "Keep going, son," I whispered. "You are almost there." I sat back down at my desk. On the wall was a new picture. It was not a portrait of me. It was a candid photo I had taken from the window a few days prior. It showed Terrence, laughing with Old Man Jenkins sitting on a stack of tires, sharing a sandwich. It was the best photo of him I had ever seen. The road back was long, and he was only at the beginning. But for the first time in years, I was not looking at a stranger. I was looking at a high tower. And I knew that Etta was watching too, smiling down on the yard that bore her name, proud that her boy was finally learning how to drive. 6 months ago, I stood in a ballroom, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and people who hated me. I was hungry, and I was humiliated. Tonight, I am standing in a gravel parking lot, surrounded by diesel trucks and people who would take a bullet for me. And let me tell you, the hot dog I am holding in my hand right now tastes better than any filet mignon I have ever seen. We decided to throw a party, not a gala, not a fundraiser, just a barbecue. It is October in Georgia, and the air has that crisp snap to it that tells you the heat is finally breaking. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and burnt orange that match the rust on my old Ford truck. We pulled the trucks into a semicircle to block the wind, and Big Mike brought his custom smoker that looks like a steam engine. The smell of hickory wood and slow-cooking pork ribs is thick in the air. It is the smell of honest work. There is no jazz quartet playing in the corner. Instead, we have a Bluetooth speaker sitting on the hood of a Peterbilt blasting Motown. There are no waiters in tuxedos carrying silver trays. There is just a long folding table piled high with potato salad, coleslaw, and trays of cornbread that Mrs. Jenkins made fresh this morning. I look around the crowd. There are about 80 of us, drivers, mechanics, dispatchers, and their families. Kids are running around playing tag between the massive tires of the rigs. I see Silas, the yard foreman, laughing so hard he is spilling his iced tea. I see Old Man Jenkins showing a new hire how to tie a proper knot. This is what a company looks like. It is not a logo. It is not a stock price. It is a community. Nobody is looking at their watch. Nobody is checking their phone to see if there is a better party happening somewhere else. We are here because we want to be here. The laughter is loud and genuine. It comes from the belly, not the throat. It is the kind of laughter that you earn after a long week of hard miles. I take a bite of my hot dog and wipe a smudge of mustard off my lip. I am wearing my flannel shirt and my work boots. I am not the chairman of the board tonight. I am just Virgil, and for the first time in a long time, I feel rich. Not bank account rich, soul rich. I watch the interactions. I see respect flowing back and forth like electricity. No one is bowing down to anyone. We are all on the same level here. The ground is gravel, and it treats everyone as boots the same way. Then I see him. Terrence is over by the cooler. He is wearing the blue uniform of Etta Transport. It is a simple work shirt with his name stitched over the pocket. It is stained with grease on the shoulder, and there is dust on his pant legs. He has been working in the yard since 4 this morning, helping to prep the fleet for the Monday run. He is not standing apart from the crew. He is right in the middle of it. He is handing a cold soda to a mechanic. He is listening to Big Mike tell a story about a haul from '99. He looks different. He has gained muscle in his shoulders and lost the softness in his face. His beard is trimmed but thick. His skin is tan from the sun, not a tanning bed. But the biggest difference is in his eyes. The frantic, desperate look is gone. The arrogance is gone. In its place is a quiet steadiness. He laughs at something Mike says. It is a real laugh. It is deep and rumbly, just like mine, just like his grandfather is. He looks up and sees me watching him. For a moment, the noise of the party fades away. It is just a father and a son looking at each other across a gravel lot. He excuses himself from the group. He reaches into the cooler and pulls out 2 glass bottles of root beer. He walks toward me. He does not swagger. He walks with the heavy, purposeful stride of a man who knows the value of his own time. He stops in front of me. He holds out a bottle. I take it. The glass is cold against my palm. "Hey, Dad," he says. "Hey, son," I reply. He takes a sip of his drink and looks out at the sunset. He seems to be searching for the right words. I do not rush him. We have time. We have all the time in the world now. "Silas tells me you are getting faster on the tire rotation," I say, breaking the silence. Terrence smiles, a small, humble smile. "Silas told me I am still slower than his grandmother, but I am getting there." I chuckle. Silas says that to everyone. It is his way of saying, "Good job." Terrence nods. He looks down at his boots. They are scuffed and worn. They are the boots of a working man. "Dad," he says, his voice dropping low. "Yeah, I want to say something. I have been wanting to say it for months, but I wanted to make sure I meant it first." I look at him. I see the grease under his fingernails. I see the exhaustion in his posture. "You do not have to say anything, Terrence," I say. "I see it. Every day I see it." "No," he insists, looking me in the eye. "I need to say it." He takes a deep breath. "I am sorry, Dad. Not just for the money. Not just for Skylar. I am sorry for forgetting who I was. I spent my whole life running away from this, running away from the dirt and the oil. I thought it was beneath me. I thought you were beneath me." He pauses, fighting back emotion. "I was ashamed of the smell of diesel on your clothes," he confesses. "I was ashamed that my dad was a truck driver, and I let a woman who did not know the first thing about loyalty convince me that I was a king because I wore a suit." He grips his bottle tighter. "I was wrong, Dad. You were the king. You built a castle out of sweat and gave me the keys, and I burned it down because I did not know how to lay a brick. I am sorry. I was a fool, and I was a bad son." I listen to his words. They hang in the cool evening air. They are heavy words, but they do not weigh us down. They lift us up. I reach out and put my hand on his shoulder. I feel the solid muscle underneath the rough fabric of his uniform. "You were lost, Terrence," I say softly. "You got lost in the fog. It happens to the best of us. The world tells you that success looks like a corner office and a shiny car. It takes a strong man to realize that success is actually being able to look yourself in the mirror and like what you see." I squeeze his shoulder. "I am not looking at a bad son right now," I tell him. "I am looking at a man who started at the bottom and worked his way up. I am looking at a man who took a beating and kept standing. That is the Hightower way." Terrence looks up. His eyes are wet, but he does not look away. "Thank you for firing me, Dad," he whispers. "Thank you for taking it all away. It was the only way I could find myself." I smile. It is a sad smile, but it is full of love. "You know what your mother would say if she were here?" I ask. Terrence wipes his eye with the back of his hand. "What? She would say your uniform is dirty and you need a haircut," he laughs. I laugh with him. "She would, but she would also say she is proud of you, and so am I." I let go of his shoulder. "Welcome back, son," I say. Terrence nods. It is good to be back. We stand there side by side, watching the sun dip below the tree line. The sky is a brilliant explosion of red and gold. It looks like the whole world is on fire, but in a good way, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. I take a sip of my root beer and let the sweetness wash over me. I think about Skylar sitting in her cell. I think about the bankers in their glass towers. They will never understand this feeling. They will never understand the peace that comes from knowing you have nothing to hide. I sit down on a folding lawn chair. My knees creak a little. I am getting old. But for the first time in years, I do not feel afraid of the future. I have a legacy now, not a building, not a bank account. My legacy is standing right next to me, wiping grease off his hands and laughing with the men he used to despise. Family is a strange thing. We think it is blood. We think it is obligation, but it is not. Family is a choice. It is a choice to show up. It is a choice to tell the hard truth, even when it hurts. I looked at Terrence. He is not the CEO anymore. He is a trainee. He makes $15 an hour. He drives a rusted sedan. By the standards of the world, he is a failure. But I look at him, and I see a success story. I see a man who learned that charity isn't about giving money to the poor. It is about giving respect to everyone, regardless of their station. Skylar called me a charity case. She meant it as an insult. She meant that I was useless. But tonight, looking at this yard full of happy people, looking at my son who has finally found his backbone, I realized she was wrong about the definition. Charity is love. That is the old biblical definition. Charity is love in action. And by that definition, I am the richest man in the world. Terrence sits down on the cooler next to me. "Dad," he says. "Yeah. Big Mike says I can start learning to reverse the trailer next week." I smile. "Do not get cocky, kid. Reversing is where the real drivers are made." "I will get it," he says confidently. "I have a good teacher." He clinks his bottle against mine. The glass makes a sharp, clear sound. "To Etta Transport," he says. "To Etta," I reply. We drink. The root beer is cold. The ribs are hot. The company is good. I look directly at you now, the person listening to this story. Maybe you have a Terrence in your life. Maybe you have a Skylar. Or maybe you are the one who feels like you are being pushed aside, like an old piece of furniture. My advice to you is simple. Do not be afraid to burn it down. Do not be afraid to take away the keys. Sometimes you have to let people fall so they can learn how to stand up. It hurts. God knows it hurts. But looking at my son tonight, seeing the man he has become, I know it was worth every tear. Respect is not given, it is earned. And dignity is the one thing nobody can take away from you unless you hand it to them. I kept my dignity, and I got my son back. I would say that is a pretty good return on investment. This is Virgil Hightower, signing off from the South Lot. The sun is down now, but the stars are shining brighter than I have ever seen them. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder that it is never too late to start over. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to practice tough love to save someone you cared about? I will be reading your answers. Take care of yourselves. And remember, never let anyone treat you like a charity case at your own table. Good night. If there is one thing this journey has taught me, it is that true love is not about shielding our children from the storm, but teaching them how to stand in the rain. I spent years thinking I was helping Terrence by making his life easy, but I was only making him weak. The greatest gift a parent can give is not a trust fund, but the opportunity to struggle and overcome. Dignity is not found in a bank account or a title. It is found in the dirt under your fingernails and the peace in your heart when you know you have earned your place at the table. Never apologize for demanding respect, and never forget that a family built on truth is stronger than any empire built on lies. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, as it helps us share these important lessons with more people. And I want to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever had to use tough love to save a relationship? Or have you been the one who needed to be humbled? Let us talk about it. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.